This is episode 149 of Stand Up. Joining me today, Dr. Ruth Ben-Ghiat. She's an expert on fascism and authoritarianism and a historian from NYU. That conversation begins after I get done blathering about 9 minutes. Then I talk with national security expert, former FBI, former Army infantry, Clint Watts. That conversation begins about 35 minutes and 45 seconds. And my final and third guest of the show is a listener and new subscriber, Canadian-American who lives in Arizona, who I also call a maybe Trumper because he's just not sure. We had over an hour-long conversation / argument, and that conversation starts at 1:19. I'm Pete Dominick. It's time to stand up right now. Hello, and welcome to episode 149 of the podcast. My name is Pete Dominick, and I am very glad to have you listening today. I have 3 awesome guests, and I have a lot going on. Man, a lot going on. How are you doing? How are you doing? How are you hanging in there in these crazy, crazy times? This new reality that we're in. Have you accepted yet? I haven't. That things are never going to return to the way that they were? I feel like that's something that we need to accept. Am I wrong? Does anybody think I'm wrong about that? I don't know. I was talking to my mom and dad tonight, and I asked them how they felt about... My mom said that she just loves how good the podcast has gotten. She loves the guests and the conversations. She was outside in her garden planting and listening to the show and really enjoying it. I said to my parents, I usually talk to them kind of both at the same time, you know? They put me on speaker. What do you guys think about the opening of the show, the top of the show, when I just kind of ramble on about things and mention news stories? And they both basically admitted they could do without it. I don't know. I'm still finding my way here on this podcast. But I've created a community, especially those of you who are paid subscribers. We've created a community. A bunch of us, over 60 of us, got together on Friday night. I just posted that for subscribers, the video with Dr. Carol. A lot of people wanted me to post it. It's available right now on patreon.com/Pete Dominick. If you pay just $5 a month, you can go watch the video of all of us hanging out. We had a great time with Dr. Carol on Friday night. Asked a billion questions. It was fun. It was interesting. And, of course, very serious at times. And Dr. Carol was great as always. But then we had a great conversation amongst the 60 or so of us that were hanging out. We commiserated, we told our truths, and it was great. And the video of that whole Zoom hangout is available right now. I highly recommend you sign up if you haven't already, and if you have, you should have got an email letting you know about that video, just like you do every morning with this podcast. And so I don't know. I don't know exactly what I'm doing. I'm trying to figure it out. But I do know that I am back. That's right. I'm back. I'm feeling really good about where I am at with this podcast. I'm feeling like it's helping people. It's certainly helping me. I love doing it. I love talking to these guests each and every day. I love hearing from you. I love this community that we built together. And I've got some pretty grandiose ideas about what we can do with this community. Building a new studio at my house, seeing as that we're all working from home, and my new studio is going to be covered in windows. I'll be looking out at my garden and doing the podcast, and I appreciate your investment in this. I realize that this show is kind of a lifeline, a sanity check for people. I realize that we have a connection, you and I, where we have a certain sense of similar values and morality, and you trust that the people that I'm getting on this show are people that you can trust, people that you can lean on and try to understand and learn from. And we're building this together. There's so many people that are helping me, and I don't know. I just wanted to say all that here at the top of today's episode because I really love the people who are supporting and listening to this podcast. There's a billion podcasts out there, and I realize that. But what I'm trying to do each and every day, because this podcast posts every day, is connect with you and learn together with you from the experts that are joining me on the podcast. And I've got some really cool ideas about how I can be doing live and be doing media and taking your calls and making this bigger and better. But I also kind of like the smallness of the local community. We have about 650 people. And by local, I mean, just that we're connected on the Patreon app, really. I'm super interested in your ideas as to how we can learn from each other and lean on each other and build this community. But I've got a couple things up my sleeve that I'm going to start reaching out to listeners and running these ideas past you to see what we can do together. So anyway, let's get to the podcast. Today I've got 3 guests, and the first 2 are guest experts. First, I talk with Dr. Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who is a professor of Italian and history. She's a historian. She's a cultural critic. She's the recipient of a bunch of really impressive fellowships. She's an expert on fascism, authoritarianism, war, propaganda, and Donald Trump. And we had a great conversation. She was on the podcast back in the dark times at the beginning, back in December. And I had a great conversation with her about where we were at with President Trump and authoritarianism in our country and around the world. Very excited to share that with you. And then I talk with Clint Watts, who I've become pretty cool with. He is a very interesting guy, senior fellow at the Center for Cyber and Homeland Security at George Washington University and a Foreign Policy Research Institute fellow. He was an infantry officer in the United States Army. He was the executive officer of the Combating Terrorism Center at the United States Military Academy at West Point. And he was also a special agent in the FBI, and he served on the Joint Terrorism Task Force. And he is a national security expert. And specifically, he is looking at the hackers and the Russians and the Chinese. He's got a very good article at Foreign Policy Research Institute website about China and Russia and what their motivations are to, or not, to interfere in our election in November. We had an awesome conversation as well. And then you can hear my conversation with Cameron Gabbs. Cameron is a listener. He was a SiriusXM subscriber. He's a Canadian turned American. He lives in Arizona, where he's going to school and driving Uber. And he's what I would call a maybe Trumper. And we talked 2 nights ago, and we talked for over an hour. And I'm really curious as to what you think about my conversation with Cameron. I'm super curious as to what you think, what I should have said to Cameron, what arguments I should have made. But Cameron represents a pretty unique, or maybe not, but point of view that I thought was absolutely worth entertaining. And we talked for over an hour about his theories and his beliefs and his morality on politics and on Joe Biden and President Trump. And I'm really happy with this conversation. But more importantly than anything else, I want to know what you think of it. I definitely want to know what you think of my conversation with Cameron, which is the 3rd interview of today's show. So I can't say which interview is the best. I try to do 2 or 3 every day so you can have a choice as to finding something that you like and can learn from. But most of my guests are experts on different issues, but some of my guests are just folks who listen to the show, listeners, regular, ordinary people who aren't necessarily media experts or experts on policy. And I want to do more of that and checking in with subscribers. And I should say that Cameron also just became a subscriber to the podcast, too. He's a maybe Trumper. And I think you're, well, I don't know what you're thinking of this podcast. Maybe it's going to drive you mad. Not the podcast, the interview. Maybe you're going to not like it. Maybe you're going to love it. I don't know. But I think his point of view is interesting. And I like him. We've connected pretty well. So Ruth Ben-Ghiat, Dr. Ruth Ben-Ghiat, Clint Watts, and Cameron Gabbs. That's who is on today's podcast. And let's get it started with my first guest, Dr. Ruth Ben-Ghiat, right now.
Here she is, one of my favorite people to talk to about all things authoritarianism and history. She is a brilliant woman and professor, and I just told you all about her. Her new book, which I'm very excited about, is available now for pre-order. They moved up the date. It's awesome. Strongmen, Mussolini to the present. Dr. Ruth Ben-Ghiat, great to get you back on the podcast. Congratulations on the book. Does this mean like the book is done, or do you still have to finish it?
No, it's done. It's in production, and it will be out at the fateful time of the election. So I'm very excited to share it with everyone.
Excellent. Important book to buy right now. So pre-order it now. Strong Men, Mussolini to the President. So, I have a lot to discuss with you and update with you based on the last time we talked. Much obviously has occurred. Unfortunately, I fear a lot of it is what you had predicted, because it seems like our president is following an authoritarian playbook, which you've taught and written so much about. Is that fair to say?
Yes. Not only, before it was, of course, we've had his recourse to propaganda and his corruption, and of course his, fawning of other autocrats. And now, recent months with what's his, treatment of protesters and his negligence in the coronavirus, all of this matches up with what authoritarians do.
Well, now we have this development with protests in this country, which a lot of people speculated, when will they come? When will people be in the streets? I think we know the answer to that now. And the president has responded by threatening to send in anybody from the military to now his kind of secret police, which he's actually doing in Portland. And my question to you is, how have authoritarians in the past, and how are current authoritarians, how do they deal with sustained massive protests like this?
So when there is mass sustained protest, this is one of the most effective things that has helped authoritarians to go away, if it's nonviolent especially. And so they have always in the past responded at first with more censorship and more repression. And here we're talking about, ranging from real dictatorships like Pinochet in Chile, where it was a military dictatorship, to Putin. There were, massive protests when he came back to the presidency 2011, 2012, because fraud was suspected, and there were huge protests. So Trump has, in his kind of, desire to make the protesters into terrorists and follow this, what I call a right-wing authoritarian line of trying to criminalize, peaceful demonstrations, this is a really bad sign.
There are all different kinds of protests throughout the country. And obviously we're seeing what I call the 21st century civil rights movement for Black Americans, the Black Lives Matter movement. But there are other different kinds of protests about reopening the country, for example. And so he seems to pick and choose which protesters he wants to, I think, indict and which ones he doesn't. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, well, Trump is one of the things that's been hard for people to realize, I think they do now, is that Trump is not in office to govern in any recognizable sense of past presidents. And he's never pretended to be the president of all people. He's only the president of his base. And, even other politicians were puzzled by this. Like, why does he do things that are going to alienate people? But he's not interested in winning in winning over the entire nation. He's interested in enriching himself and his cronies and doing Putin's bidding and spreading as much hatred and polarization as possible, because he needs to stay in office to avoid prosecution. So if you come at it with that framework, then a lot of the puzzling things he does, make more sense.
What do you think is the relationship between him and Vladimir Putin? What evidence do you think suggests what type of relationship? Because the most obvious thing would be what you already, I think, touched on, which is that he respects, looks up to, and wants to role model his presidency after someone like Putin. That seems to be obvious. He shows them all kinds of respect. But do you think there's something deeper, some kind of other connection?
Well, I do. And much of this is on the public record that his sons were very clear up to 2014 that Russian funders were a major source of revenue for the Trump Organization. And they were very open about being supplicants of Putin, right? And so he goes into the campaign and all the more than 100 contacts during the early campaign with that. And one of the telling things is that, a lot of people talk about Trump as being crazy and impulsive. He's a loose cannon, all of this stuff, right? But if you look at what he really cares about, such as the relationship with Russia, he has never, ever misspoken about Russia or Putin. Not once has he slipped his tongue and criticized Putin. So he's extremely careful, actually, and extremely in control of the most important things to him, because whatever the nature of their relationship, whatever, leverage Putin has on him, Trump is very well behaved.
You believe he does have leverage on him? I mean, I do, but I don't. I respect your opinion a lot more.
All you can go on is how he is behaving right. as the head of state of America. And the latest thing that, of course, came out, which is just so upsetting, about Putin having bounties on American soldiers. If he's not going to speak out for that, then you have to wonder why.
Of course you do. Going back to what we're seeing now, these protests in the street, what do you make of what's gone on in Portland over the past few nights, where these kind of unmarked law enforcement agents that at least we know, I guess the only thing we know is that they're from the federal government. Maybe we've learned more about them in the last couple of days. I haven't followed it closely enough, but nonetheless, they seem to be kind of this secret federal force, and people are talking about it being some kind of a pilot trying this out and see what happens in Portland, because history tells us there's a lot of this with authoritarians in the past, right?
Yeah, I was very disturbed when I saw that, because of what I've studied. Some people were citing it's like Pinochet and military juntas where they hood you, which is what they're doing. They come in unmarked cars, unmarked uniforms, and they take you away. The other person who is reigning now who does this is Erdogan. And we hear a lot about Putin. We don't hear enough about Erdogan. And they're very, very close, he and Trump emulates him a lot. In fact, I saw 2 weeks ago something that said that Erdogan is the leader he talks to the most.
I read that. He's like on the golf course. Trump was like, if Erdogan calls, bring me the phone. Like something like that, for real.
And then you had Michael Flynn, who was simultaneously working. Yeah. So, crazy. But Erdogan kidnaps Turks who are he sees as his enemies, with unmarked vans and men in, some kind of unmarked uniforms, and they hood them and they take them away. Now, Erdogan also does it abroad. He hunts down Turkish people abroad, but he does it in Turkey too. So I thought immediately of that. And
worth mentioning that the American CIA did that, but not to Americans in America.
Well, that's good you mentioned that, because I have long said, and people, think I'm alarmist or just a kook, that part of, when you have right-wing authoritarianism, you use tactics that the military used to use on foreign enemies on your own people. So I have tweeted a lot about I think that some form of counterinsurgency, which is what this is. They're defining protesters as insurgents. And so all of that practice and expertise and knowledge that the CIA used and our military used abroad is now being turned on Americans.
But just to be clear, I just want to make sure that we're being clear. I mean, I've studied and read a little bit about insurgency and talked to a few experts on it, like David Kilcullen. You're not suggesting, and we're not suggesting, that American protesters can be defined in any way as insurgents. At worst, they're vandals. But there's not some kind of organized, violent protest that I would say would fit the description of an insurgency, right? It's not like the American Revolution.
I don't know. You're exactly right, okay. And I don't believe that. However, they're
identifying them thusly. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, right. Really good point. Yeah, that's crazy and scary.
The language they're using, anarchists, terrorists, all the other names that they're calling them, it is similar. And so then you have this technique of the unmarked vans coming to take people away. Well, this was something that was done abroad, as you point out.
And I don't want to jump to a conclusion, but I don't think it's unfair to say that a lot of the men, especially that are now police officers in America, are also veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan, where they fought insurgencies. And so they are using some similar tactics. And unfortunately, and so if it weren't so scary, hilarious, and embarrassing, they're wearing desert fatigues in the middle of Portland. But they know what they're doing, is what I'm saying. A lot of them, they've been there before, and so that's terrifying. But you talk about in the past too, in history, where the ruler would disappear people, and more importantly, I really want to talk with you about facts as well. Tell me about that.
About facts?
Well, I mean, tell me first about disappearing people. Who did that, and how did they do that?
Yeah, so we can, keep with the example of Pinochet in Chile, who had a coup supported by the U.S., who would come and round up people in helicopters and kidnap them on the streets. Also, children were kidnapped and kind of brought up by proper Christian people if they were indigenous children. But in the case of military dictatorship, there were the disappeared. And this was all over Latin America, where there were military dictatorships. Here we have, they're being arrested and held, and then they're being released. But I want to point out that from the time that we had what I call the military occupation of D.C., after the protests in Lafayette Square.
Right. A few weeks back, the day he walked over the Bible and from the church that day.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
helicopters in the streets.
See, that was another thing. You had the helicopters buzzing people. That's very unusual. But the Trump administration is extremely sophisticated with optics and psychological warfare. And the sight of all those unmarked men in D.C., that was the first little test run. And the sight of all those troops, and it wasn't sure what unit they were from, what branch they were from, lined up on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, for example. These were very imposing, scary images. And so your listeners can think about some of the things that are being done are to intimidate us. Their psychological warfare tactics to make people, in my opinion, intimidated so that future protests, which may grow around the election, become harder to sustain.
Yeah, well, they become harder to sustain if people are terrified, and
yes.
So that's where a lot of this comes from, I think. My big question to you today, the one I really wanted to spend as much time as we can on, is disappearing facts, because I feel like we've kind of been talking about some of the other tactics and techniques, and we're talking about history and the present when you talk about Erdogan, Trump's BFF in Turkey, but and Russia and Putin. But I feel like the most effective tactic thing that he has done is a thing that he says almost every day on Twitter or in an interview or some type of appearance, which is to call things that he disagrees with fake news. I know we've been hearing this now for 3 years, but it has been, in my opinion, so effective. Tell me how that has worked in the past differently, obviously, before social media, I guess the printing press and the television after that, I suppose. But how has fake news worked in the past? And we can then talk about, obviously, how effective, in my opinion, it's been for Trump.
It's interesting because in my book, I have a chapter on propaganda that goes over 100 years.
Yeah.
And so what you see is, of course, the information medium changes, right? So Mussolini and Hitler had newsreels and radio, and of course you have social media today, but the strategies remain the same. And one of them is, so all of these guys are really corrupt. All of them are violent. So they start, just take one example, they start denigrating the press. They start trying to discredit the press, right? That's the essence of the fake news. And the reason they do that early on is so that they need to turn the public against the press, so that when the press exposes them, the public already sees them as hacks, as partisan hacks, and doesn't believe them. So they go after any area of society, experts, scientists, judges, intelligence services who have, superb research arms. Anybody who could expose them and get dirt on them has to be completely discredited and often, also killed, right? Depending on which the regime is.
I mean, any sector of society that provides the public with statistics or information or, frankly, performs a duty that is in the public's interest is to be discredited, from institutions, government institutions and agencies, to universities, to individual experts like Dr. Fauci.
Yeah, and it's in one of the scary things about Trump is that he's been extremely thorough. This is why I don't like it when people say he's incompetent. They have done a huge sweep across all the federal agencies. It's like a huge purge between making hostile work climates and firing people. They have completely renewed all the different bureaucracies in line with their aims. And so one of the major ones is, of course, for all autocrats, climate change denial. They have to get rid of any, partisans for climate change science, because that stops them from plundering the country, because that's what they really want to do. Again, they're in office to enrich themselves. So any field of knowledge that conflicts with their aims has to disappear. So I actually have a sentence in my book that says, strong men disappear bodies and they disappear fields of knowledge. So there's a kind of synchronization.
Sorry, I paused because it made me want to vomit with
it's
nausea.
horrible.
But fields of knowledge is such a wide-ranging sentence, covering an entire, breadth of a sector of society, if you will. Fields of knowledge like science. I mean,
It's because they think big and they act at a very broad level. So in our day, it's climate change science, but Orban in Hungary, who now rules by decree, he banned gender studies in 2018. And that was a prelude to forcing. This year, he had a decree that said that you have to pick a sex, man or woman, legally, and you can't be transgender, you can't be intersex.
What a strange choice to make. What a strange mountain to die on.
Well, it's
gender identity.
Yeah.
It's
part of this. It's part of this, right wing counter revolution. And in Chile under Pinochet, they closed they banned sociology, they banned philosophy, because those were fields that they thought were full of leftists, and they made you think critically.
Well, you mentioned climate change a couple times, but I feel like, who am I to tell a woman with a PhD and has written many books about this? The better example would be the vaccines, because that and the pandemic itself, the science around epidemiology and around vaccines, what's that called? Virology, regardless. The idea that it's not a thing, it's a hoax. Oh, and by the way, if there is ever a vaccine, don't take it because Bill Gates is behind it and he's going to microchip you. And so we don't, the science around vaccines and the virus, the pandemic, seems to be something that he is questioning and even saying didn't happen.
Yeah.
Or isn't happening.
Right, which is why all these tragedies are happening where, now some people are posting that they thought it was a hoax and then their son died, or their mother died.
Some guy drove by a hospital yesterday and started screaming at everybody outside the hospital, "Where are the lines? Where are all the patients?" And one of the people working in the hospital said, "They're inside in bed." What do you mean? Like, it was just, but he was insinuating that that the hospitals aren't filled with people who are very sick. And how can someone come to that conclusion? Only if the leader behaves the way that ours has, it feels.
Yeah. And something that's very hard for people to hear is that these kinds of rulers, they truly do not care if you live or die. They have zero interest in governing. They only are there to enrich themselves. And so Trump has his entire handling of coronavirus. He did all of the tools of the strongman. Propaganda. He used misinformation, and then he had to suppress testing because it's a form of censorship because he's trying to censor the results of how many cases there are. So you've got that, and then corruption. the stimulus funds have become an avenue of cronyism, right? He's just using them to help people who are going to help him get reelected.
Yeah, I haven't followed that very closely. It's
really,
like I don't even want to look at those stories because it just seems so. I mean, if I were to ask you, the professor, the expert on this, about corruption, what would be a good example of corruption? You could, I'm sure, list countless ones, but that would probably be the aid going out as a result of a pandemic is going to what, his friends?
A lot of it is, and
probably people who are donating to his campaign.
Yeah, and the key thing was that early on, Steve Mnuchin said that they were not going to disclose who got the stimulus funds and the loans. There are all these, as you know, different programs because it's, quote, proprietary information. So the key about authoritarians is that they can't have any transparency and they can't be accountable. And so they do things that remove information from the public realm. And so once they decided they weren't going to release who got the money, then you can easily imagine how corrupt it is. So it's a dream for Trump because how much is the stimulus funds released? A huge amount of, it's like a kitty. And because he's not there with any notion of the public good, he really couldn't give a whit about the public good. Any kind of money released for public welfare becomes his private money because authoritarian rulers, this is a kind of general principle, they don't see any separation between they feel they own the state. They have a proprietary sense of governance. So they see no separation between what's theirs and what's the
treasury,
nation's.
The treasury and their own checking account.
Exactly.
Before I let you go, last question is: what about this idea of masculinity or masculine pride when it comes to authoritarians? I mean, there's a glaring, obvious note that, and please tell me who are the female authoritarians have been in the past, but it's most always men, and that's no mistake. And probably now why people like Orban don't want these gender studies and so.
Yeah, so there have been pretty, many female tyrants in history, but the kind of modern authoritarians and fascism and communism and now, the new crop and all the military dictators, they've all been men. I think in the future we could get a female authoritarian, but it's been a man's field. And so one of the things I focus on in the book, which has actually been neglected, is that it's not just propaganda, corruption, and violence. It's also machismo and virility.
Yes.
And so this is really, really important to their diplomacy, like, how you see how Trump is with Putin, and, Putin walks around holding hands with Modi, and they all have this kind of male bonding thing. But it's also a kind of strategy of political legitimacy. And it's very toxic because, for example, getting away with crimes and saying you're too much of a man to have to obey laws that are for weaker men is part of it. So it feeds into corruption. And Trump not wearing a mask, that's also his kind of being real men don't wear masks. And also this idea that the leader, the authoritarian leader, is a special person. And many people in America think he's been put there by God. Mike Pompeo and evangelicals, they really believe that he has a divine mission. So he has to seem untouchable even by disease. So he's a notorious germaphobe, but there he is without a mask. And this is his machismo, right?
Yeah, that
so
religion,
it's a real thing.
That religion point is the one that is the most upsetting to me because there's just not that there's many arguments for the other ones to convince people. But Catherine Stewart wrote a great book. Sarah Posner wrote a great book. Jared Yates Sexton has a great book about the intersection with right-wing evangelicals and Christianity in America and the power and what they believe in. It's terrifying, and the prosperity, all that, those beliefs, nuts. Thank you so much for joining me again. I think it's now time for everybody to thank my guest by go pre-order her book, Strong Men, Mussolini to the Present, Dr. Ruth Ben-Ghiat. What a pleasure to be in conversation with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Ruth Ben-Ghiat. I don't quite have that relationship with her yet where it's become a little bit more comfortable and personal. It's still kind of like professorial, and I'm the student, but I'll get there with her. I'll break through. Her expertise and her background is pretty important, pretty fascinating. She's an academic. This new book looks great. Strongman Mussolini to the President. Can I get 10 listeners to buy that book right now, pre-order that book, and prove to her that we got a pretty curious, passionate community here? She's great, and we should all be supporting these guests and buying these books and learning more about them. Follow her on Twitter. Tell her you heard her right here on the show, and go get her book. And the best thing you could do, honestly, is tell her that you bought the book, that you pre-ordered the book. That'd be awesome. So if anybody can do that, please do. Okay, now my next guest is an expert on national security. And like I told you a little bit about him earlier, he is a former FBI, former Army, he's an academic. He's a national security analyst. He's now with the Foreign Policy Research Institute. He's on Twitter at Selected Wisdom. He has a TED Talk. He has a book that he wrote, and I highly recommend that you watch that TED Talk and get his book. It's called Messing with the Enemy, Surviving in a Social Media World of Hackers, Terrorists, Russians, and Fake News. Here now, my conversation with Clint Watts. And we are on with the great Clint Watts. Thank you very much for joining me, Clint.
Thanks for having me.
Always really great talking to you. People love when I get you on. So let's get right to it and ask you about, first of all, the Twitter hack that occurred. Was it last week? Major hack of huge accounts, including former President Obama and some big name people. What do we know about that? What's important about that?
We don't know a ton, though we do know some. Like a standard procedure for a social media company might be to say nothing, until they get to the bottom of all of it. And I have to say that Twitter did start providing some info, which is the interface that controls, like the master interface that controls Twitter accounts was hacked into, which allowed the hackers to sort of go in and get behind any accounts that they wanted to. So this would be the equivalent of somebody going in through the inside. And so that was a question. Is this an insider or is this somebody hacking in from the outside? And from the way Twitter explained it, it seems like it's someone hacked in from the outside. And they said social engineering is in they dupe somebody to get into their account. And so this is a big deal because not only did they control all of the verified accounts for a deal of time, but they also were able to maybe see direct messages like between accounts, which could be particularly damning. And the scheme was this Bitcoin scheme, which is typical of like criminal frauds, but it also just raises some questions because you kind of wonder like, okay, why do all of this for Bitcoin when you can do so many other things, for Bitcoin and for scams? And so the question is now whose accounts were exposed. And I believe Twitter has said that 8 people's accounts in particular were exposed. But I think even bigger is just it raises the election 2020 interference questions, right? Like instead of a hack of the DNC, do we have a hack of Twitter? Or what if this happened the night before or the day of the election? And not just changing like what Joe Biden says or Donald Trump says, but like actually changing the vote counts so that they appear false. Or getting into a bunch of news outlets feeds and saying, oh, so-and-so won a certain state or didn't win a state. That could create like mass chaos and misinformation and disinformation. And so I think that's the big worry is like, are we ready? I think the only good news is that this has happened now, and I'm sure Twitter probably won't let it happen again, or at least not this way. So at least we can prepare for it. We've got a few months until game day.
I feel like the most chilling point that was made is because of the way Donald Trump uses his Twitter account and the types of things he says is that if someone were to hack and gain control of his account, they could hypothetically say any number of things that the public, because of the way that Donald Trump has used his account and because of how careless he is, would just believe it. And I don't know if it would matter if Donald Trump came out in front of cameras and was like, I'm hacked. I didn't say that. We're getting to the bottom of it. Like the damage could already be done. That seemed to be like the most chilling, that Trump's account could be hacked and that based on the way he's used it, whatever a hacker says could be believed and could cause any number of crises.
To echo that, Donald Trump last week on that exact day spoke in Farsi on his account towards Iran. So this is nation to nation. We've talked about being at war. We did a targeted killing, one of their IRGC commanders. Like, imagine if this had happened at the same time, right, where Iran is already heated up. And in other parts of the world, India is one, for example, where
that was purposeful, though, from his account.
Right. That was purposeful.
He put
from
out
his
a
account.
tweet
But imagine,
in Farsi directed towards the Iranians because that's their language.
Yeah. Imagine somebody come right in behind it and said something else in Farsi. Like, holy cow! I wouldn't even know what was being said, but the Iranians would, right? Like they might react and think it's real, or make some sort of maneuvers. And that's the problem when you have a president using his personal account as the nation state's leader's account. And in India, for example, we were doing some research, and it was remarkable how many elected officials of the country of India had fallen for fake Donald Trump, Ivanka Trump, other public official fake accounts, and use them as endorsements of what they're doing. So you can see, just like you said, how easy this would be, right, to set off a domino effect that would spiral out of control before anyone even knew it. And Twitter couldn't even get control of those accounts back, right? So it took, a couple hours, 2-3 hours?
Why couldn't they get the? Well, I mean, you're saying they couldn't in this latest hack, but generally, why can't Twitter get control of an account? I understand how a hacker can ask for demand a ransom on a city's infrastructure, website, whatever, when they hack it. But in this case, if Twitter operates the account, they don't have a kill switch on an account.
Well, they had a kill switch on verifieds, which they did pull, but then there's that lag, right? So, but it took them a while. Like, and that kill switch killed off some people's, like Ali Velshi, for example. His was days before he got access.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I just had him on the show this week. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, and so he had several days, I believe, where he couldn't access account because he did some correct procedures, to like try and protect his account. He knew something was up when he saw that. So I think the scary part is that not only did they gain control, Twitter had to take everybody offline, and then there's a huge communication gap. And so how do you rebut or correct information, right? Or like get it back out in the open if 10,000 accounts are taken down or whatever it is, maybe 1,000. I think it was 2,000.
That's why a bunch of verified Twitter accounts were tweeting like, "Test, am I back?"
Yes, mine got shut down. So I was offline for 2-3 hours. Yeah.
I mean,
and then it just came baak.
At what point, what does it say about me that I'm jealous that even though I'm a verified Twitter account, that no one gives a fuck?
Well, here's the thing is like,
why won't anybody hack my account? How needy could someone be?
Well, like mine didn't get hacked and posted on, but they turned it off. So something about maybe the controller's account that they got a hold of allowed them to access certain accounts. But there's fears because who did get hit? Barack Obama, Bill Gates, former Vice President Biden. It was kind of left leaning. There were a lot of celebrities,
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So why didn't President Trump's look, if you're running a Bitcoin scam, it's all just about percentages, right? It's a spear phishing thing, basically. You send it out to whatever account has the most, and it's percent of 1%, right, is going to respond to it. And that's going to result in, people sending Bitcoin, small amount, but still shows that it works. So who's got the most following? President Trump. Why wouldn't you do that? Because your return is going to be higher, right? So, yeah, it's interesting, but I don't know if it's probably just because whoever the hacker was didn't hit the terminal that controlled that account or something. I don't know. I'm interested to see what Twitter puts out. And at least they've been pretty forward leaning. It also just shows like how much all of us rely on Twitter to spread and share news very quickly.
Yeah. It was weird. I just I had when you wake up from an afternoon nap, if you've ever taken one, I imagine you don't have the time, but I did the other day, and I took like a half-hour nap, and I woke up, and when you wake up in the afternoon after a nap, you're like, what world am I in? What day is it? What time zone? What's real? What's up and down? And I go on Twitter, because that's what you do in the middle of the day, and everybody's like, am I back? Test? And I'm like, so I just tweeted, what happened? That's it. And that was a weird thing apparently to tweet because people just answered any kind of rando things, but I was still confused as to what was going on. But you've just
right.
I was too lazy to even look into it. I knew I'd talk to you at some point. You'd
explain it to me. So
it all worked out.
Let's talk about your most recent piece posted at Foreign Policy Research Institute, FPRI.org. I just shared it on Twitter. Really interesting and important. It's titled Election 2020. Russia Cares, China Doesn't. Foreign Influence, What America Should Worry About This Year and Next. Ooh, every word of this piece is fascinating and important. What were Russia's interests? How have they played out in a nutshell? And then we can get to where they are at now and talk about China as well. But let's just look in the past a little bit about their foreign interference in 2016, 15 too.
Yeah. So 15, 16, they had infiltrated the U.S. audience, really starting about 2014. And so they were in our audience space, but appearing to look like and talk like Americans. And so they were nudging and pushing for Donald Trump and against Hillary Clinton. I really should restate that. They were mostly anti-Clinton and then became more and more pro-Trump. And to support that operation, they hacked the DNC, John Podesta, and a lot of other targets and dumped that information out through WikiLeaks and one of their own cutouts known as DC Leaks. And now, post-election, we've learned a lot from the Mueller investigation about how that influence piece worked in social media and what they were trying to do behind the scenes. So if you fast forward, they never really stopped doing their interference in America, right? They're always pushing on the polls. And so in non-election years, they're working on social, religious, economic divides, pushing on each side. And then you could see towards the end of 2018 and going into 2019, they were very interested in 4 more years for President Trump. And it was a little over a year ago, I wrote a thing at the Daily Beast, which was secure the base, split the opposition, Kremlin's plan for 2020. And they've tried very hard. They keep their, what they call their bridge, which is the traditional values crowd, which is usually focusing on white Americans, focusing on gun rights, focusing on Orthodox Christians versus, American Christians, building that bridge. And then on the political left, they try and focus on transparency, anti-imperialism, or no foreign wars. They kind of bridge this divide. So the WikiLeaks Snowden crowd is their crowd for the political left. And they kept pushing it and they've gotten more aggressive as the year has gone on, but they've struggled. And so their big opportunity, I think they thought, was to amplify the impeachment trial in Ukraine, right? And really try and deflect, as it's Ukraine interfering in the election, not Russia.
Right.
And, it's Biden. They were very harsh on Biden all the way through. We've been tracking it for 18 months. They're hyper negative Biden. Biden is to 2020 what Clinton was to 2016. And they were pro Sanders to a degree, but only as a divisive wedge, against Biden, essentially, to try and push him down. And then on the other side, they were very pro-Trump, consistently. And it's just not worked out for them this time, which leaves them in the quandary of to hack or not to hack if there's a 10-point difference, right? Like Russia knows they can only tip an election 1% to 2%. Maybe they get a DNC leak, they drop it out there and it just nudges, a candidate one way or the other. They actually don't control all U.S. minds and the populace. So now they have to decide, do we go for Trump here in the final days? And what could we do? I think for them, their perspective is what could we do that would change the needle on anything when America is tearing itself apart? I mean, between the impeachment, COVID-19, the protest, everything going on with President Trump right now, Portland and Chicago, and all these things, they've tried pushing the Ukraine thing again, and no one even pays attention. For the same reason Americans didn't pay attention during the impeachment trial. It's a foreign matter. It's really complicated. No one even knows where it is on the map. Right. It's just very difficult for Americans to get riled up about it the way they did around the DNC hack and leaks, which they did understand and did not realize it was Russia. Right. We are braced for it this time. We know this is kind of what they do. There's no element of surprise, this time for the Russians. Yeah. So people are more skeptical. And I think reporters are better, about it this time around, too.
People and reporters are more skeptical of the strategies and social media accounts and guessing that they might not be Americans. They might be Russians or bots. Is that what you mean in terms of the skepticism, what we've learned?
Assessing the, who stands to gain from the pushing of this information, into the ecosystem, why are they receiving it? and they understand this time around. Whereas last time, you would see journalists flock towards WikiLeaks, DC Leaks dumps, right? Like they would jump.
Yeah.
And they kind of would take Julian Assange's narrative as their own, right? Like Julian Assange released this and he said, Clinton's corrupt or emails or whatever. And they kind of would run with that to a degree. And then when you look back, at least when I look back, I'm like, wow, the amount of ink spilled on the emails, versus the amount of ink that wasn't spilled on things like, paying a porn star in the run up to the election, which people knew about, all these other, issues in terms of, financial records and improprieties and things like that just Donald Trump really didn't.
I got one for you.
Didn't get a lot of press until after he was in office. Like, oh, maybe we could have looked into this a little bit more.
How about just I don't know how much ink was spilled or not spilled, how much was written about this, but who was I talking about this with recently? Maybe Sarah Kendzior, or I don't know. Paul Manafort being Donald Trump's campaign manager. How about just nonstop investigations into that? And who he is and what he's been involved with. What a crazy story just that is. I mean, we can talk about Roger Stone and everybody else being that they were partners and connected, but Manafort's recent past and career, and then all of a sudden he becomes Trump's campaign manager. I mean, that should have been scrutinized, I feel like, I don't recall, but it feels like it never could have been enough. Anything there?
Yeah, it was huge for our team. But like our team had been watching the Russians in Syria. That's how we stumbled onto them. And then they became part of that pro-Trump loving conservative crowd, that same group. And I remember, they were pumping Trump against Rubio, right? And like other people in the primaries, we knew it. And then to see Manafort kind of step into this space, for us, it was like, I think it was like May of 16, April, May, like sometime around in there. It was like, I think I almost had a heart attack. I just remember being like so shook by it. And it was almost 4 years ago exactly. Right now, we'd watched the Russians do a campaign about Incirlik Air Base in Turkey coming under a terrorist attack. And we wrote it up at the Daily Beast. And Manafort was the campaign manager. And he went right out on CNN, I think it was about August 8th or so, and said, well, the media is not covering that terrorist attack that went down in Incirlik. And we just we couldn't believe it. It was just so striking. And he was out of the campaign within a week or so, but didn't really surface until 17, 18, right? When people started really looking into it. And it took a long time to get on people's radar.
Turkish connection and the relationship with Erdogan is something that everybody should just keep scrutinizing and trying to figure out. That recent piece, I forget who did this again now, where apparently Trump, has, or Erdogan has Trump on speed dial and Trump wants to talk to him no matter what. Like even on the golf course, bring me, if Erdogan calls, bring me the phone. Like, that's the deal. Whatever that's all about, I think everybody should be wondering. You have a sentence or a piece, just part of this I wanted to read, which I think is really, really well said in your piece at FPRI about Russia and China and their interests in the 2020 election. You write, Trump has been pretty great for Russia. The president nearly always comes to the Kremlin's defense. He solidified Putin's positions in Crimea and Ukraine, surrendered Syria, ignored aggressions in Libya, turned a blind eye to GRU assassinations in Europe, denied electoral interference in 2016, and allegedly overlooked bounties placed on American troops in Afghanistan while pushing for Russia to re-enter the G7, now formerly the G8. That is quite a rap sheet. That's quite an indictment, and I just wanted to read that. But people will say that you wrote in this piece, but his people are saying, no one has been harder on Russia, and he sanctioned them and all kinds of other things. What has, if anything, the Trump administration and his 97 different secretaries of state done to punish Russia for starting with Russian interference, much less the rest of the list you just had?
Yeah, they would point to sanctions. There are more sanctions, but it's also we need to have more sanctions, right? Like there's no real way to qualify it because Russia hasn't been this aggressive in my lifetime, towards the United States. So it would require a response of anybody, even if you did very little. They would point to some of the indictments, but even the indictments, if you look at the Mueller investigation against the troll farm owner Prigozhin, have fallen apart. Like we're not taking them to trial. We're not really pursuing them. Even sanctions that they put in place, like Deripaska with the aluminum maker, Rusal, I believe is the name of it. they let them diverge or divest so that they could build an aluminum factory in Kentucky, right? So you can say all of these things, but they tend to kind of let it slip.
On one hand, on
fact.
the other hand.
Right. And so that's not being really hard. And part of the reason we still have interference from Russia is because we haven't struck back. Like, I do not, in a certain sense, if I were Russia, I cannot fault them for continuing to push.
Right.
Because you would say there are no real costs to this. Like indicting a lieutenant colonel in the GRU as a badge of honor, right? Like that guy's he's not leaving Russia. He probably got a pay raise or promotion, right? Or they had a party for him. And, a sanction against an oligarch is bad, but if they're allowed to divest or maneuver or shift their resources or move into Bitcoin or whatever else, or Putin takes care of them in a different direction, well, then it's going to be okay too, right? Like you're not really incentivizing them to go against Putin. He's richer than all of them and more powerful than all of them. So I think it's just an interesting dynamic of until we overtly strike back, you're not going to see much slowdown. And so the only time it's really happened was really coincidental in Syria, which is a lot of Russian mercenaries attacked an American force there, and they lost somewhere between 200 and 300 people. It hardly made the news. And since then, that's never happened again, because I think the Russians realize, right, like the U.S. military, once fired upon, is going to absolutely overwhelm you with crushing military force.
It's not like, I don't know, does Putin pick up the phone and say, tell your guys in Syria not to fight back against my guys? I mean, that's not a thing that happens. It doesn't work that way. And so if you fire on American troops, in this case in Syria, they weren't going to stand by and not fight back. They did their job.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that takes us. Go ahead.
That puts force meets force, and then they stop. And I think that's the same with hacking. I think that's the same with, influence around the world or election interference. And we'll see what happens.
But what you're saying is that the only way behavior changes is if there are consequences or punishment in this case in terms of foreign relations. And you could talk about that with your toddler maybe too, although I'm not sure I agree with that. Sometimes I think you just got to reward them to change behavior. But in this case, that may not be an option. But more importantly, like many other issues, including a virus, the president doesn't only not punish Russia, he doesn't seem to see the problem. I mean, It's weird that it's been as long as it has been, and there still hasn't been any retaliation on the fact that our election was attacked. Our country's democracy was attacked and interfered with. The president has looked the other way. He doesn't even acknowledge that it happened or that it was a problem. So not only are there no consequences or punishment, he's actually rewarding Putin constantly. He doesn't even talk about
incentivizing it.
But you say also in this piece, if it doesn't look close, then what will Russia do? You already touched on this, but you said this leaves election day if the polls aren't close and a Biden victory seems likely. The Kremlin could get really evil. What does that mean?
Well, the short-term objective of any Russian campaign is to get their person elevated. That's the whole active measure strategy, win through the force of politics rather than the politics of force, which is elevate people sympathetic to Russia into positions of power, and then you'll get what you want, that was the idea with President Trump. So if you can't get that, then you're looking at a Biden, pushback, right? Like if Biden wins, he's not going to be a friend of Russia, coming in. That's obvious. And so you say, okay, the longer term goal is always to subvert democracy, erode confidence in institutions, and then pit other Americans against Biden, right? So how do you do that? Well, you create such a situation that people can't trust the vote. They can't trust election machines. They don't know if Biden is the legitimate winner, or create doubt about that. And so the ways you can do that could be denying power, for voting booths.
Electric power.
It could be putting out disinformation about mail-in balloting, which they have picked up 5 to 10-fold in the last month alone.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. The Russians, you could go to any of their news sites or the French news sites, they amplify them, and they are talking nonstop about mail-in balloting.
What's the strategy? What are they saying?
They just want Americans to be confused or think that their vote didn't count and that Biden isn't the legitimate winner and that you can't trust him, nor can you support his policies post-election, right? So his mandate to govern. You could also send people or mobilize them towards polling places under it's a coup, right? Election rigged, it's a coup. So imagine, very pro-Trump groups who get this information because they wittingly or unwittingly are in communication with Russian influence operatives.
Mm-hmm.
And they're saying, hey, you need to show up, kind of like the protest or
Election Day
COVID-19
violence.
Election Day. Yeah. And they've pulled this before. They did it in Montenegro during their election, but they did it kind of more in person. This time it would be solely online, right? Just like encouraging people to do what they already maybe are thinking about doing or wanting to do, and then amplifying all that coverage on television and pointing and saying, hey, look at the United States, totally unstable. The European allies, you can't trust them. Even if Biden wins, it's a disaster. Your alliance is broken. You see what I'm saying? It sort of is like a domino effect of
I see what you're saying.
Just eroding the United States to such a degree that Biden is just tied up at home. He can't even do anything.
I see what you're saying, Clint Watson. I don't like it one bit. How about that?
No, it's not good. Not good.
You got time to talk about China?
Yeah.
And you're right. In September 2018, President Trump claimed China had been interfering in the 2018 elections. Quote, they don't want me or us to win because I am the first president to ever challenge China on trade. So, Clint, what is China doing to interfere in the election?
Yeah, so it's interesting the perspective the administration has. On the one hand, they don't see what Russia's doing or address it. But if China does like a advertising placement of a Chinese newspaper and a U.S. newspaper, oh boy, that's interference. We need to get worried about it. And so China very overtly does influence, right? They will solicit free contracts. Behind the scenes, they do a lot of hacking, but it's not about polling places. It's about intellectual property, right? Or stealing defense secrets, espionage kind of stuff. But there's no evidence. We've looked for a year and a half. We spent a lot of time on it. The Chinese spend very little energy talking about the election. They're very negative towards President Trump, but they're going to be very negative towards whoever is the president. Like, there is no bridge. And I think that's the difference between China and Russia. When you hear people say, oh, China is going to be all in the election, you're going to hear all sorts of conspiracies about China and mail-in ballots. They don't want Trump to win. It's nonsense. China spends very little time thinking about the election because it doesn't matter who wins. No one's going to go after inauguration. Joe Biden's not going to come out and go, let's build a bridge with China, right? Like, it's never going to happen. He's a pro-labor Democrat, right? Like, that's his backbone in his history. So if there's no bridge, the election strategy doesn't work. For Russia, it's essential. They got to elevate people that like Russia or believe in Russia's policies so that they can build a relationship. Right now, after COVID-19, the pandemic starting in China, coming to the United States, they're moving. We're in a tech war with them. We're in a trade war with them. I see all of those being sustained. And for China, they don't really focus on it. Their bridge to the United States is economics. It's denying the NBA, access. It's pushing down dissidents on Zoom. It's a business to business relationship, or as I say, they like multinational corporations and tech bros, right? That's who they want to work with on the right and the left. Is that middle? They want stability. They want predictability. They want to be able to maneuver around the world, and that's where the fight between the U.S. and China is going to be. After the inauguration, it doesn't matter who the president is. We got a big challenge on our hands in terms of influence around the world, where we have stepped back and China has stepped in a huge way into the void. They're delivering COVID-19 relief into Europe. They're setting up Belt and Road Initiative in places like Serbia or throughout all of the Pacific Rim. They are interfering in elections in places like Australia or New Zealand or Taiwan, closer to home, where they have a candidate they want to elevate, right? They have somebody they want to bridge. And the other part is both countries, Russia or China, use their diaspora populations to help elevate their presence abroad. The Chinese diaspora in the United States is not going to do a lot of work for China in the election. The Russian diaspora, particularly in places like Germany and Europe, they do. They still love Russia, right? They still have this connection there. Yeah. And that is your vehicle to help you elevate yourself in those countries. It is your forward army, right? Like, that can help you in terms of influence. China just doesn't have it right now.
Well, what it sounds like is that and I've heard this from a number of different kind of foreign policy experts, is that as America's power and influence in the world wanes, China's is waxing. Is that the opposite of waning? Is growing. And they are, as America withdraws and talks about America first under the Trump agenda, the China, meanwhile, is investing in anything from foreign aid to business investment all over the world, where they think they can make gains. They're taking our markets as well, and different agricultural products and so on. So that's just my analysis off the top of my head, reading other foreign policy experts. Is it fair to say that that would be the paradigm right now, as we're losing influence and power and really, I think, mainly reputation? I see this tweet that's on your Twitter timeline, a Newsweek article at Selected Wisdom, everybody's Clint's Twitter handle, that says Chinese and Russian foreign ministers agree America has, quote, lost its mind.
That's exactly right. I mean, what's been interesting
Certainly
is
seems that way if you live here and you look around, fighting over masks and shit. Every day I watch like videos of people getting in fights at convenience stores and fast food restaurants over a mask.
Yeah.
I mean, it's my weird porn. It's not healthy.
Yeah, I'm sure the founding fathers were worried about the tyranny of wearing a paper mask when you grocery shop.
Right, but it's divisive, and that's what I mean by that's the evidence I'm giving for we've lost our minds. Not to mention, we think you can buy kids on Wayfair.com and shit like that.
Exactly. And look, I think I call them, the axis of disinformation, or the triad of disinformation for Iran, China, Russia. They amplify each other against the United States. They're more powerful together in the information environment by amplifying each other. They have lots of differences one-on-one vis-a-vis each other, right? In the Middle East, or Russia and China are in a huge standoff right now around COVID-19 out in Eastern, Russia. And so there's protests in Eastern Russia that they're very worried about at the Kremlin. So that being said, these authoritarians see themselves for the first time. They've never seen America so weak. They've never seen America so withdrawn from the world. And so they're moving as fast as they can to scoop up the pieces wherever they can. Russia and Libya, they're trying to make a field day out of that. They've already gotten Syria. China, all over the world in terms of economic influence. Right. Huawei. And we do. The one thing that is right is we do need to stand up to China and push back. The current approach is sort of a haphazard, bizarre, sometimes trade, sometimes not, sometimes tech, sometimes not. Not well explained from the administration.
That's because they don't have it. That's because they'd have no agenda. There's no consistency. There's like one guy. I mean, it's like Peter Navarro fighting with Robert Lighthizer, or like they're fighting within each other. And as you write in this piece, which is like the most upsetting sentence I think I've read from anybody in a long time, this is what you write. What could Russia or China do at this point that America is not already doing to itself? For Putin and Xi, it's easier to ride the American tide of democratic destruction than make the wave. Ooh, I don't like that at all.
No.
I hated this piece, by the way.
Yeah, it doesn't make you feel good, right?
I hated the way it made me feel.
Yeah.
I hate you for writing it.
Yeah. Well, it is. I mean, look, if I'm Xi, I look and I go, I'm going to waste time trying to get somebody elected in the United States to achieve what? They can't even pass a bill. They can't even pass the Honest Ads Act. Like, even if I elevated them, what would they do? They couldn't execute anything I wanted anyways. So
they have the My Pillow guy on a pedestal. What else could I do? That's our dream to get him there.
I mean, what would the return be other than backlash, right? Like, oh, are you guys going to make a trade deal? Probably not. Like, I can't even figure out what you want, and you change it all the time. Or the last national security advisor who was here was fired, as were the two before him, right? Like, there's a different person that shows up.
Why would we trust the word of this guy? Yeah, that's a really good
Don't waste
point.
Any time.
But it's such a really solid point. The Secretary of State's is too.
Yeah, they don't even know who's going to be there next time. I'm sure they take all the meetings and go, okay, trade war, okay, great.
Yeah.
It sounds terrible, and we're going to stop everything we're doing. Just wait on you folks in D.C. to tell us what you're going to do to us, right? Like, I would just laugh and be like, okay, whatever. And, like, it's nonsense. And by the way, we just bought all your debt for COVID-19, where you didn't actually stop the pandemic. People took 8 weeks of unemployment and then went to Lake of the Ozarks and infected each other, right? Like, you just look at it as China and you go, this is great. And it's to the point where, like, even when we watch in the Chinese information space, there's more people for another 4 years of Trump than for Biden. Like, trade war, tech war, or whatever, they just see the instability of the Trump 4 years and they like it for another.
Why do they like that? I mean, like, investors and businesses and major industries don't like that uncertainty, and there's so much disarray with Trump in charge because he doesn't know which way is up. How does that? I mean, they want to invest in us. They want us to buy their stuff. They want our, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what their interests are. But
I think they're looking at it as we're going to power through, right? They have the ability to suck it down that we don't. They will just turn to their internal population and be like, America's beating us up. You need to do better, right? And the country will move, and
right.
we'll
That's
force it one way or another.
Their culture and government. They can just bang out a widget, start beating the drums.
The other one that they love is this whole keeping scholars, Chinese students from coming to the United States to study. The Communist Party, Chinese Communist Party, is just grinning. They're like,
this is an American policy that was announced, I think, then withdrawn, or has it changed at all?
It has been reduced or pulled back, but it's created such uncertainty that if you're a student, you say, I'm 18, 19, 20. Am I going to wait a year, or am I going to go over there and study for 6 months and get pulled back? And, people start making decisions based on...
Why does China like that? Don't they want their citizens to come over here and get educated by our great universities and just on our ways and then bring them back?
The problem is their most talented people get absorbed by us.
Right.
So over time, if you're in a war on artificial intelligence and you need algorithmic scientists, right, and they have all the tech, they have more data, they have less rules and regulations, all they need is scientists, right, the trained scientists, man, this is a home run for them. They go, okay, gosh, guys, I'm sorry you can't go to MIT. You can go to our school, and we're going to give you the world, right? Like, we'd love for you to stay here. For the most part, they've had talent drain at the top, right? Like, they retain, lower skill, lower income workers, but they lose their top performers. Same with India, as a country. They come to the United States and our universities, all countries do that. And we absorb all of them into our country, which makes us great, literally makes us great. Like, that is our tech industry. That is, manufacturing, doctors, scientists, bioengineering. Those are all things that China for a long time had no internal capability to build up on its own. That's all they needed was that human capital at the top. Now they're there, right? They've caught up with us and will probably pass us in AI within the next couple of years, just because they're putting so much emphasis in it, and they're not being derailed by things like defunding the National Science Foundation or some sort of crazy internal turmoil about let's go after Google and Facebook, even though we never passed the Honest Ads Act, or there's nothing to put your feet on in the United States right now. So everyone slows down.
What does that mean to surpass us in AI? Can you give me kind of define an example of how that would affect people in industry, national security, commercial, whatever?
So it could be everything from bioengineering in terms of like human genomes and programming them, because the artificial intelligence can learn quicker than ours can. It's that they can harness more data just because they have more people and they have no real privacy regulations, right? It is being able to do financial transactions digitally, which they are doing on huge scale. Like, they're basically creating their own digital currency over time. It's going to be a big threat to us. And then the machine's learning from all of those transactions and knowing how to make moves faster, right, in terms of investments. It's a wide swath of things in terms of like how social media companies operate. Things like TikTok, by the way. I don't know if you've used TikTok, but their algorithm is impressive. And I'm sure that's because it can learn so quickly.
Oh, my daughters are total addicts.
Yeah, because it knows what to feed you faster that you want to look at. Yeah. So it's like a very small example of what you can do if you got the data, the resources, and the tech.
Last question for you, which is, I'm obsessed with all these conspiracy theories and the people that believe them. And I'm really concerned about it, obviously terrified about it, but I'm also very interested in kind of the human behavior about it and the contradiction of it all and cognitive dissonance that just has to be in place. But because you are who you are and have the background that you have, and you know so much about how the technology works, I just wanted to get your kind of thoughts on how dangerous and pernicious these conspiracy theories have become. And I mean, like the QAnon and I mentioned the Wayfair thing and the Bill Gates. And I mean, obviously the pandemic and the virus has really, I think, put a accelerant on these theories in a way that nothing else could. And how do you break them down? When you see these theories, when you see these tweets, when you hear about these stupid documentaries, how do you, if you were to discuss them or debunk them, given everything that you know about how the world works and how technology works and just kind of common sense, how do you generally take those on, Clint?
I try and break them into a few categories on what the theme of the conspiracy is. So there's like, and then what's the severity or what's the impact of it, right? And then if I could do it like on an XY chart, it would be what's the behavior change or reaction that's created from it, right? So like Pizzagate, right, is guy shows up with weapon and starts shooting. Well, then add to that like group of guys show up with guns and start shooting. That's one more step, right? Mobilization to violence. Then you back away from that to protest, destruction of property, to people not buying things, a little bit more subtle, to just belief systems, and that's less severe.
But the most, I think, pernicious, the most dangerous outcome that you would put on that X or Y line would be whether or not someone's going to take a vaccine.
Yes. And so that's
belief
like
in the effectiveness of a vaccine is kind of the only thing that matters. Because let's say by some miracle, a really good vaccine is put out that works. Doesn't matter if a certain amount of people don't get it.
Right. So then it's like health, technology, political stability, social stability, that would be the Y sort of axis. And you can kind of like plot it out, on an XY, like what I get really worried about, what I don't. Things like UFOs don't usually create mobilizations, right? So it's like very low down on the general conspiracy end. But if you want to recruit people to believe a conspiracy, that's where you start. Because if they believe there are aliens, in their neighborhood, it's real easy to convince them that Hillary Clinton's got Parkinson's or that Bill Gates is, some part of some secret society. So, you can kind of tier it up that way. That's why I get really worried, like the 3 busloads of Antifa text message thing that went around, and then you see militias rising up in towns surrounding people. That gets me really, really worried because it's super fast too. I think that's the other part of it that I should mention is the speed at which it mobilizes.
Right. Yeah.
Some of them are slow burns, right? QAnon is kind of an aggregate slow burn, whereas sometimes these Antifa things are like 2 hours, right? Or
because when there's something you can
really quick.
Yeah, when there's something you can grab your gun and show up for.
Yes.
That category is a hot one because you can take action and you can stop the bad people that don't exist, that aren't coming, that aren't showing up. I like Mom Tifa and Dad Tifa. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, and Aunt Tifa.
And Aunt Tifa? I didn't see that one. No, that's good. Yeah, they don't seem nearly as frightening, I think, as the whole Antifa idea. But
no.
Well, thank you very much for talking to me today. It's a great piece. Everybody should follow Clint on Twitter and get his book and follow at FPRI and read this very important piece. Keep up the great work. You and your team there are doing exceptionally important work. And it helps me sleep a little bit better at night knowing that you're out there doing it, Clint. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot, Pete.
All right. I'll talk to you soon, pal.
See you.
Clint Watts, everybody. Thank you, Clint. And go get his book. Go Messing with the Enemy. Watch his TED Talk and follow him on Twitter at Selected Wisdom. Tell him that you heard him here on the podcast. It makes a big difference. I'm telling you. If you're on Twitter, go tell him you heard him here. And if you're not on Twitter, join Twitter just to tell Clint Watts that you heard him here. Okay, so my next guest is a listener and now new subscriber. He just signed up. And a great guy. I disagree with him on some things here, obviously. We had a pretty passionate conversation. I call him a maybe Trumper. He's a Canadian turned American. And at the beginning here, we learn about him. And then we learn about his values and theories on things and political philosophy. We had a great conversation. Got a little heated. I get a little heated. He was calm and cool. But I call him a maybe Trumper. And his name is Cameron Gabbs. And all of the information for Cameron on his website that he mentions are in the show notes for today's podcast. You can also follow Cameron on Twitter if you want to talk to him, if you want to address any of his arguments. I might even have, I'm really interested in hearing what listeners think about the arguments that he made and how I countered them. When I was on Sirius and I would be talking to callers, so often listeners would say, well, why didn't you say this to him? And why didn't you say that to him? And I totally agree. or disagree. I mean, but often I hear people making much better arguments or points than I made in that conversation. So I would love to know what you would have said to Cameron, and I highly recommend you reach out to him on Twitter. He's, like I said, a good guy, and I'm sure he would be happy to hear from you. He's on Twitter at Cameron Gabbs, CameronCabbs 15, Cameron Gabbs 15 on Twitter. And like I said, check out his website and his writing by clicking on the link in the show notes for today's episode. Without further ado, my over hour-long conversation with Cameron Gabbs, which I'm really curious to hear what you think about. Okay, Cameron joins me from Arizona. Cameron is a Canadian originally who just became American, and he lives in Arizona, and he's not sure who to vote for, which is not common. So I'm psyched to have you, and we've talked a few times before, and I appreciate you talking to me tonight. Thank you, Cameron.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So let's just talk about a little bit about your background, first of all. You grew up in Canada? Where?
I did. So I spent most of my childhood in Vancouver, Canada, and then I moved to Edmonton, Alberta later on in my life. First part was traveled around to play hockey, and my second part was to get in the oil field.
So you were a pretty serious athlete, hockey player specifically?
I was. I went up all the way to the pro level, but never played, in the show or anything.
And then, well, that's pretty cool. We should talk about that some other day. And then you worked, what was your job in the oil industry? Which is like, I mean, how many people does the oil industry, do you have any idea, like what percentage of folks are employed or connected somehow to the oil industry up in Edmonton?
In Edmonton
or in the
itself,
province.
Even in the province, I mean, that's basically our Texas. So,
right.
Probably indirectly or directly related has got to be at least 50%,
right?
Minimum. So in Canada in general, though, probably 20 or 30% of the population in some way is connected to it.
So what brought you to the States and why Arizona?
So originally, I'm one of those, my mom remarried down here to an American, and my sisters came down early on, and I stayed up there, like I said, to play hockey. And then eventually when I got my process done, I'm like, well, I'd like to have dual citizenship. And so here I am.
Was that difficult given the fact that your mom was here, or was was it hard to become an American citizen?
Absolutely. So this is one of those big misconceptions or something that people don't talk about. I mean, so for all your listeners, I am white and, male, so I got a lot of privilege on that end. But in the immigration process, they really don't look at that. And I had to spend 18 years in the process away from my family, no different than any of the people coming up from Mexico or any other country.
So
and it sucked.
So do you think that being a white male gives you privilege? Is that what you're telling me?
Oh, in a lot of respects, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's something we can get into later on. But when it comes to immigration, they don't care one way or the other. Granted, Canada gets a little bit leniency on time frame, but even still, like I said, I spent a lot of years, my better part of my middle life, away from my family because of the process.
Are you ready for the Pete Dominick political threshold test?
Yeah.
I will apologize ahead of time if any of these questions seem condescending.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Go ahead.
Because I don't know you and my audience doesn't know you, and it's good to know what the baseline is for people. Do you believe Barack Obama was born in America?
Absolutely.
Do you believe in the scientific consensus around climate change?
99% of it. Absolutely. I'm a very big climate guy.
What does that mean, a big climate guy? And you say 99%, like what am I missing? Or
okay, so I mean, like I said, I grew up in Vancouver, the home of Greenpeace, hippies, and recycling, everything like that. That's the way I am. I do believe that we have a big climate crisis. However, the only thing, the caveat to it is that we are speeding up the problem, but it's going to happen eventually. So we can argue over the numbers, whether it's 100 years, 1,000 years, or by 2050, as they all say.
Sure.
That can be debated.
I think that's fair.
But otherwise,
I think probably the most fair statement is actually that the most conservative predictions
have been inaccurate. It's actually happening faster than the more conservative predictions.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. What do you have you thought about, read about? Do you think what caused the financial collapse of 2008 here in the States? It didn't really affect Canada nearly as much, but.
Okay. Well, interestingly enough, and this is, you mentioned before, if I wanted to plug anything, I do have a website, not PC15.com. At least it used to be a .com. Now I can't afford to keep it that way, but you can still look it up. I actually have an article on there that I call Misconception of Greed. I honestly, the best answer I can give is I think that the lack of education in America led to it. There's a lot of ignorance here. And people get duped all the time, and the power people took advantage.
And that being what? The lack of education or understanding of people led to what?
Well, in everything. I mean, just right from school all the way up. Common sense has kind of left us in this country. The ability for the richest people to, tell us lies and be believable. It's a tough situation, but I think most people just didn't understand what they were getting themselves into back in 2008 anyways. And, some greedy people made it look good for the poor, and people got stuck and then they lost.
Is there a more specific policy change or law or regulation that you think? I mean, obviously there were a number of causes, but there were, sure, in my mind, and I think most experts' minds, economists' minds, a few primary catalysts for what caused the collapse. Right.
Well, as far as I can see, in my opinion, anyways, that like I mentioned in my article, is that we're in a capitalist country. There's no doubt about it. It's none like any other. Canada's close in the sense it's kind of a social capitalist country. So we have the same somewhat principles. But I think it's all about, this idea that growing up, you're supposed to just do whatever you can to become rich and powerful, and vanity rules. And you can play upon that. I mean, that's why infomercials sell us garbage at 2:00 in the morning here.
Right.
And I think that's basically it. I mean, we were sold on a faulty way of doing things, and people bit.
But if I were to say that I'll be very specific, the primary catalyst for the collapse of the financial industry and the economy was the housing bubble bursting, which was as a result of the deregulation of the financial industry, which allowed the banks to basically gamble with our money, and including our mortgages. Does that sound right to you? Do you disagree with that at all?
No, absolutely. I mean, you can politicize that, or just as a simple fact, absolutely. People, like I said, took advantage, and deregulation on certain aspects of that. When it came to FHA loans or conventionals, everything, like I said, it was all a scam. And absolutely.
What did you think of the invasion of Iraq by the United States of America at the time? What do you think of it now?
So my simple explanation for war stuff and whatnot is, I'm a big supporter of military. I appreciate what they do, and I thank them every day, every chance I get a chance to talk to a military personnel. But I don't believe in going on other places for money, power. I think it's a wasted war. I think all the wars in the Middle East are wasted. And, it's more of a UN thing where we should be over there supporting and building schools and buildings and education, not with military weapons. But that's just me.
You must have some interesting thoughts on healthcare. What do you think about it? Is there a nation in the world that you think has a better or the best healthcare system? And I know this is probably a big question that you probably have a thoughtful answer for, but growing up and spending most of your life in Canada, how would you compare the Canadian healthcare system to the American healthcare system?
All right, great question. So once again, for anybody that does want to, venture off to the website that I mentioned, I have an article on that too. I have a bunch of different articles on my opinions. Healthcare, universal healthcare, growing up in both countries. I've seen both sides of it. I'm all for universal healthcare, universal education. This is one of those ones where we're getting burned in America. It's going to go universal. Maybe not in this election cycle, but the next one for sure. We're going to be definitely on some sort of full-time Medicare for everybody, which is more beneficial. America lags behind on medicine.
Okay. So when it comes to your kind of political philosophy, is there any thinker, person, book, ideology that is, or many that have influenced you the most in your life? Is there any experience that has influenced your political ideology?
I don't think there's any particular experience. I follow mostly the people that from your show when it comes to media personalities, journalists like Matt Welsh and Olivia Knox, things like that. Obviously, Eric Siegel, one of my favorites all time. Great guy, signed a book for me. Wish he was on tonight, but I like Sam Harris. That's a little more on the philosophical or the psychological side of things. But no particular. I'm a centrist. I'm right in the middle, and I do not believe in extremism in either side. So it's kind of a tough one. I'm trying to find people like that. The only one close to that is, like I said, some of the couple of the journalists you mentioned, or like a Julie Mason that was before you in Sirius. I used to listen to her all the time. Try and find the middle all the time.
So she's more of a journalist, I'm talking about, kind of the political philosopher. You mentioned, though, that. So given every answer that you've given me, you sound to me like a fairly progressive guy. So let me ask you this. What is it about progressives or liberals or Democrats that you really disagree with or even don't like?
So absolutely. I mean, all in the end game, I think we both have a fairly liberal view on everything. Those things you mentioned, abortion, gun rights, all that stuff. The problem is that I think there's a hypocrisy. Obviously, the elitist, stereotype that goes along with it. I do see that a lot here in America. I just find it so hard that liberals or Democrats, blue, always fighting for let's be young and let's be strong and let's be inclusive and all this. And here we are, we're talking about who should I vote for? And you're putting up a 78-year-old guy that can barely speak. And it's like, Jesus Christ, it drives me insane. I was all for Pete Buttigieg. No lies there. You can look at my Twitter feed. I was for him, and I think he sold out. I think he was bought out by the Democrats.
What do you mean? What do you mean sold out or bought out?
Okay, so I watched every debate, every primary thing, all the town halls. I was very involved. I'm very involved in the politics anyways, but I was really interested in Pete Buttigieg. The guy was doing very well. He had won barely in Iowa. He finished good in the next couple. And then he come to Super Tuesday, and magically, when he actually could have, fought all the way through, everybody bails out and Biden becomes the number one guy. It just, I don't like conspiracy theory, but I mean, it just.
Well, I think I want to explain that to you. I want to explain that to you and tell you and then see what you think, because I've heard that kind of thing before. That sounded to me like purely politics. And it sounded to me like this. Pete Buttigieg was not going to he had no path to victory, and mainly because he could not get any black people to vote for him. Joe Biden's path to victory arguably was black people, in fact, especially in South Carolina. So I think I have this right, but after South Carolina, Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar and who are the other two, I think, basically everybody but Elizabeth Warren cashed it in, and they did that, and then I think Elizabeth Warren did it the last second because they thought that would be the best thing politically, or they thought that Joe Biden would have the best chance to beat Donald Trump or whatever. But there doesn't seem to be any kind of conspiracy or hijinks. It is pure politics for a politician to say, listen, I will drop out and no longer challenge you if you promise to give me Secretary of State. That has happened with, I think, every politician, governor, mayor. That's called deal making. No conspiracy. Nothing. You could say that that's wrong or immoral if you want, I guess, but it sounds to me a lot like any kind of deal that any one of us would make about anything. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that in his position at that time, Buttigieg, anyways, I think he had a path. Most people, I think the left media made it out that he didn't, and Biden was the only choice after a strong South Carolina. Fair enough, but he was basically out of money, out of time, and he would have probably split the states. Bernie would have probably won Super Tuesday, and then Biden would have had to drop out, and it would have been Buttigieg, Bernie, all the way to the end. And I think Buttigieg, being the younger, smarter guy, would have probably held out.
I don't think
he would destroy Trump.
I think that's completely wrong because of what Pete Buttigieg and his campaign said. They said we don't have a path. We don't have it. We don't have the votes. They didn't have the votes. He didn't. He didn't win anywhere.
Well, he won in Iowa and he came second.
There's a lot of, but there's, if anything was at play, I think it was against Bernie in Iowa and for Buttigieg, and even then I don't believe that. But and he barely won. I mean, and who gives a shit about Iowa? Frankly, Iowa is not. Well, I mean, really, I love Iowa. I have a lot of friends there, but it's all, there's no diversity. Any state that has a lot of diversity is going to be a lot more representative of the Democratic Party than an all-white state or an all-black state. Not that there's an all-black state, but I mean, so, all right, so so that's all interesting, but let's move on. So what would then, given everything that you've said and given that you were supporting Buttigieg, so it would sound like that you just really don't like Joe Biden.
That's definitely a part of it. It's not the only part. I think, you know what? I followed his career, not so much way back in the day. I was a little young for that. But over the past, obviously, his times as vice president and a little bit before in Congress, I think he had an edge back in the day. And I don't think he's far off, but I think he's probably going to be worse off than Trump now. Worse off
in terms of his cognitive abilities?
Well, a little bit of that. I wish he could, form a sentence. That would be nice. I think he's lost an edge, and Trump is obviously too. There's no doubt about it. But when I'm weighing things out, I don't see Biden being better for me, and possibly he could be better for the country as a whole, but I don't see it right now.
So
I'm trying to figure out.
What did you think of Obama's 8 years? What did you think of the Obama presidency?
Well, I was all for Obama in the first 4. I kind of tailed off in the back 4. I would have, if I could vote, I would have voted both times for him. Like I said, I'm not far right or by any means. I think there was some good from him. I think there was some bad. I mean, he was a good politician. He started bringing universal health care to the forefront. And a few other things, and he was all for climate change. So that was good, but I don't think he was quite as good as they thought, and I think he gets a little too much credit on how he rebuilt the country in his back 4 years. I mean, when you start from the bottom in 2008, you've got nothing. You can only go up. So I think he gets a little too much credit there, but I didn't mind him.
What is there anything specifically policy-wise that you really were opposed to?
Opposed?
To Obama?
Maybe on the tax front, a little too progressive that way, and regulation. He was definitely a little more, and at that time I was in the oil field, so that hurt me a little bit there. But that's a tough go. I mean, like I said, I didn't think he was bad.
Was there anything you thought he was too progressive on taxes?
Yes, well, in general, and the Democrats like to raise taxes, as a whole, and they like to overregulate, I think, as a whole. And I think we have to let people kind of, just live their life a little bit more on the chance side.
But we're paying the lowest tax we've ever paid in America, and including under Obama, and he actually didn't raise any taxes at all. He only raised taxes on, I think, it was medical device company and like tanning salons to pay for healthcare. And what I don't understand with the Republican argument, which it sounds like you're making, is Republicans actually are the worst fiscally. I think it's always been a fraud that Republicans have convinced Americans that they're fiscally conservative, when in fact, all Republicans do, they spend more money than Democrats, arguably, because of the wars, and they don't pay for them. Democrats spend money more likely domestically, and they pay for them with taxes. The money that Obama spent that wasn't paid for was the stimulus plan, which was to get us out of the hole that we were in, as you said, in 2008. But he didn't actually raise any taxes. So maybe you don't remember it. Maybe you didn't know it. Maybe you're misinformed. And maybe I'm wrong. I'm open to always being wrong. But I don't believe that Barack Obama raised income taxes on any Americans, including even the wealthiest. I don't believe he was able to do that.
Okay, fair enough. Honestly, and I don't know every detail on his tax code at the time because I just had moved here and I couldn't vote, so it really didn't make much of a difference on that part. So I don't know.
Let's move on. Let's just get back.
I will say that when I was living here under Obama, I did have to pay taxes every year. With Trump, I don't. I understand in 2026 or whatever, it's going to revert. But right now, I make money with Trump. I don't make money with Obama, and I wouldn't make money with Biden.
Well, how do you make your money?
Well, I work.
What kind of work do you do?
But I do. So as you know, I go to Arizona State University, great school, by the way. And through that, I do Uber to pay my bills.
But how are you paying more under Obama? How do you fall into a tax bracket as an Uber driver that you are being penalized by Obama or that you're being less penalized by Trump? I actually really don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, when I moved down here a few years ago, I did a couple years under Obama, and when I make relatively the same, with plus or minus a couple $1,000s each year. And when I was under Obama, I paid a little bit, and with Trump, I get some money back. So
all right, so let me
beneficial to me.
Yeah, I don't actually think that's wrong, and I'll try to convince you. Maybe you won't believe me. So taxes aren't all there is, right? Meaning. Sure. You'll make more money almost no matter what you're doing if the economy is better. And the economy would be far better without Trump because the economy has collapsed because of the pandemic. So it doesn't really matter what tax you're paying because really nobody's making any money because the economy is so bad because this guy's let it into the shit tank because he has no idea how to govern. And so this idea that you're going to make more money under Trump because of your taxes – well, no, because you're not making probably hardly any money now at all as an Uber driver because the economy is in such rough shape. So does it not matter more if that's the only thing you care about, the main thing you care about, the economy versus taxes? Meaning if you're making $50,000 or $100,000 in this economy versus 25 or 75 in a different economy, you're going to. Aren't you going to be happy to be paying more taxes because it means you're making more money?
That would be fair for this year. But in the first 2 years of Trump in 16 and 17, 17 and 18, because the first year doesn't count. But 17 and 18, that's what I'm talking about. When I did a full year before COVID, I got returned. So if the pandemic didn't happen, I would be still on path of making money as a refund from the government not paying up.
Okay, so I always have an issue with people when they make that argument in terms of, who they're going to vote for. I mean, I understand it, but I think that if you're saying, well, I'm going to pay less taxes under this guy than that guy, and that's the only thing I care about, well, then there's not much to say, right? Because when I look at it, tax-wise, I never think about taxes. Never. I never think about them. I don't think about me. Ever when it comes to vote. I think about people who aren't me because I think that I'll be okay, generally speaking, as I always have been. What I think, what I worry about is vulnerable populations, including and mainly my daughters. So I'll be okay because I'm a man, but my daughters won't be okay because they won't have control of their bodies and the decisions they make. They won't have as much opportunity. There will be more sexism because of the way that this president, in this case, leads. Like, I'm not thinking about my taxes. I'm thinking about the planet, and I'm thinking about vulnerable populations mostly when I vote, not me. What do you think about? It seems very selfish to have the point of view that you're having, which is I make more money under this person than that person. It also, like I said, seems very short term because I think in the long term, you're going to make a lot more money with a better economy than with a terrible failing economy, regardless of the taxes you're paying. So I'll shut up now.
Well, that's absolutely fair, and it's a good way to look at it. However, yeah, you're right. I do look at it slightly different. And when it comes to voting is, your constitutional duty is to vote, and you're supposed to vote your conscience and for the betterment of you. And everybody's supposed to vote for what they want. And then the majority rules on who voted for what they want. So it's nice to try and vote for the poor guy that lives in the shanty, somewhere in Louisiana or whatever. But you're supposed to vote for what you want.
No. See, I disagree with that. Yeah, of course. I mean, we disagree fundamentally on the usage, and I think this is the most fundamental, difference, and I'll call it problem in America, which is unlike your homeland, Canada, or Scandinavia, or most of Western Europe, or really most of the world, which is using the word I or me versus we. You keep saying what's best for me or what I want, but I always look at it about what's best for us and my whole family, my whole community, my whole country, my whole planet. I don't see myself as separate. And I don't, by the way, think that's noble or a character quality. I actually think you could argue that it's selfish. What's best, for example, with insurance or climate change, there is no me with insurance. There is no me with climate change. And frankly, there's no me with tax policy. If we all pay more taxes, we're all going to get more services, like in the community that I chose to move to. So how do you define, or how do you justify the usage of the kind of the individual versus the collective?
Well, so one, I think there's a bit of a misconception of, Canadians or even Europeans, which I've been over there too, and I have friends over there. The socialist ideal is, yes, as an inclusion, you try and do everything for the betterment. And if everybody pays a little bit more, if you properly disperse that money, absolutely. But people still think for themselves also. And you got to be careful, because you're talking about, going against human nature. You may believe that voting for somebody else, because your vote, you want it to be that way for that person that doesn't have something, but they're going to vote for what they want, no matter what you vote for.
No. And let me. I don't think that's, again, okay. That would sound noble. I'm not voting. I'm not voting for them because they don't have something. I'm voting. It's less noble. It's, if they're okay, I'll be better. If that person has a job or an activity or school, they're not going to be in trouble. They're not going to be a criminal. They're not going to go to jail. It's not, and that benefits me and my community. It's not that I don't want them to be poor, even though that's true. I don't want them to be poor. It's that I want them to have an opportunity. I am about people having opportunities. And I think the more opportunities that people have, the healthier a nation or a society is. And when we limit opportunity, then a country, in this case, gets completely screwed up and imbalanced. So it's not about that I'm being noble, that this poor person, I want them to have a job. It's that if they do have a job, that's great for all of us.
Oh, absolutely. And as a society, we should always look to, bring up the bottom end, because it makes everybody better. But what we're talking about here is more specifically voting. And what I'm saying is, say, a black man in Ohio is going to vote for black rights more so than he's going to vote for taxes, or he's going to vote for this. Your girls, when they're able to vote, they're going to vote for women's rights, or you're going to vote for whatever works for you. And as a collective, they collect all those votes and they figure out what's the majority wants. And that's the way you're supposed to go. If you just vote for any one of those people, they're still going to vote for them, and you're not going to really have a vote. I mean, and it sounds like
I disagree. I don't see it separately. I don't see that guy separate from me. And that black guy in Ohio, I see him winning is not me. Him getting something isn't me losing something.
Fair enough. Well, that's something I've learned in being here in America so far, is that unfortunately, one of the downsides to being here is that there's a lot more selfish attitude here. And if you think that all those people are going to vote for what you want, I think you're a little bit mistaken. It's a good thing to try and do, but people are thinking for what they need. And I'm trying to look at the best possible solution for my life, my wife, my dog, my living situation, my family around me, and who's going to do the best for me. And that's what makes it tough.
Well, okay. Well, given that, I would still argue that Democratic policies will overwhelmingly benefit you given your entire life and everything that you described. I mean, from healthcare to education to student loans to taxes, everything Democrats want to offer sounds, Cameron, like you specifically. If I were to decide, I don't know that much about you, but given what information you shared with me, there's no Republican policy that would benefit you. You're no longer in the oil industry. And even if you were, again, that's short-term thinking. Oil is going to be dead. If you're smart, you'd get into renewables now. The only reason the coal industry still exists is because it's been incentivized by Republicans in government. It can't compete anymore. And eventually oil and gas won't be able to compete anymore. But even if they could, it's destroying the planet. And so it's not going to be good. You might make money now in the oil industry, but your kids will lose as a result of it. So why? Why would you do? It's short-term thinking.
Well, you're absolutely right about the oil thing. There's a reason I'm out of it. I mean, I probably lost 10 years off my life with the poisons that I was dealing with. And I'm definitely not a proponent. Oh, trust me. I've waited and walked around in stuff that, should kill you in an instant.
Yeah, no, it was funny you say that. Because I can't imagine like doing that every day, because I just put insulation in my shed studio and I'm like 2 hours with that. And I think I'm going to get cancer and AIDS. Meanwhile, you did it every day.
It's absolutely true. So I'm against fracking. I don't mind downhole drilling. It's a lot safer for the environment. But that's a whole different can of worms. But no, I got out of the oil field because it's very difficult and you make good money, but it kills you very quickly. So
and it's really hard work too.
Yeah,
from what I've heard, most jobs, if you're in the actual field, yeah.
Yeah. So, there's no argument on that. And when it comes to renewables or anything like that, I think I don't like to use morality as the case, because, can be a slippery slope also. I think it's more just, like I said, my ideals align with liberal. I should go blue, but I think they take it too far in a lot of ways. And I think there's a lot of constraint in the laws that they like to create. And I'm trying to think of specifics, and maybe I'll come up with one. But I like the idea of being left alone. I do like that kind of libertarian or sort of right conservative idea where it's like, just let me do me as long as I'm not hurting anybody else, and you do you.
Where is that? I understand the appeal of that, but where is that actually playing out in real life? Let me every day. Go ahead.
That happens here big time. I mean, as you know, we're a very purple state. My vote actually matters this year.
Yeah.
It can go either way. I mean, I grew up small town and country, and then I also lived in big cities, 2 or 3 of them. And I understand both arguments. But what I do like about the conservative side, which unfortunately is Trump, because I don't like Trump personally at all. I think he's an idiot in a lot of ways. But he is fighting for the conservative part, where it's like, hey, we want to be a small town hick. As long as we're not doing anything to hurt your city, leave us alone. Where I think that the big city, blue, wants to enforce or put their ideals and tell the small town people what to do. But I
don't understand.
It's a tough call.
I don't think it is a tough call at all. I grew up in a small town, very small town, hick town.
Syracuse, right?
No. Outside Syracuse, Marcellus. Look it up on Google Maps. Surrounded by cornfields, hunting season open, trout season open, deer season open. Nobody was in school. I didn't hunt. I fished. But I grew up with that mentality. But explain to me a specific, behavior or idea of that kind of libertarian mentality that you think is fair or applicable. Where if you do something, it shouldn't matter. What law or regulation has been put upon you that you wish weren't there, so you could have more freedom to do what you wanted?
Fair enough. Okay, so this is kind of the analogy I go when I talk to my friends and stuff like that, and I'll maybe you'll like it, maybe you won't. And by the way, most of my friends are well-to-do, very progressive, and always vote blue, and they're doctors and stuff like that. So they're smart. the way I see it is like this, and this is the mentality that I get when I talk to most people about politics. If you got two people running for office, one guy for the Democrats, one guy for the Conservatives, for the Republicans, if they knock on your door, here's what you get. Republican, you open the door. Hi, how are you? I'm running for office. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make sure that nothing changes in your neighborhood. I'm going to make sure you get to keep your big truck, keep your gun, keep your religion. We're not going to bother you. We're going to lower your taxes, and we're going to make sure that everybody knows that we're good on the world stage. The Democrats knock on your door. How are you? I'm running for office. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to get you to sell your truck and buy a Prius. I'm going to get you to get rid of your guns because I can't trust you with them. I'm going to raise your taxes. I'm going to put up a bunch of signs and speed bumps on your street because I can't trust your kids to walk across the street. And we're going to make sure that everything else is just under our delegation and our power. And that's kind of the ideal, the principle that people always debate at the dinner table. And I like the idea that as long as you're not hurting anybody, leave me.
But you are.
Alone.
But see, I don't understand that. That's everything you just said, though. Everything. Please don't take this personally. But everything you just said is complete and utter bullshit. It's just bullshit. Your gun does hurt me. I want to regulate it. I'm not taking it from you. I want to regulate it. I like guns. I shoot guns. I know everybody I know has guns. Your truck is hurting me. Two ways. One, the bigger the truck, the worse it kills people, pedestrians and people in smaller cars. And more importantly, the bigger the vehicle, the more gas it burns, which is why in Europe and the rest of the world, nobody has a huge problem with the government regulating how much gas they can burn. So if you have if you have a big truck, fine. But it can't. You can have the biggest truck in the world, and soon you'll be able to have a tractor trailer, a semi, or a pickup. Tesla's making them that burn clean. Nothing is completely harmless. So it's not true that your gun doesn't hurt me. It's not true that your religion doesn't hurt me. And it's not true that your truck doesn't hurt me. All three of the examples that you gave do hurt me. Your religion hurts me because I can't control my body or I can't be gay. You're going to try to convert me, as a matter of fact, to which is not a thing. It's actually a human rights violation, and it's behaviorally immoral to gay conversion therapy. You're going to say I can't marry the person I love. Those things do hurt me. You can practice your religion, you can shoot your gun, and you can drive whatever vehicle you want, providing that it's within reason, providing that it doesn't pollute the environment, murder people, or control my body. So all three of those things do have an impact. And what I think Democrats are saying, and I count myself now as a Democrat and as a progressive, is no. Let's be reasonable. Let's be fair. Let's not be extreme. In America, the gun lobby, the gun people, if you will, have every right they want. And what progressives are saying is, we're not going to take your guns, except for some who are saying we'll take some guns, which I don't think is going to be a possible policy solution. But you can't have this many bullets. You can't have this many guns. You can't have this type of gun. You can have guns. But if you do, by the way, final point, you just have to register them like you would your car and have a license and have training. So it's not extreme at all. You still get your guns. You still get your truck. You still get your religion. We just want it to not destroy people's lives.
Right. Absolutely. And so just to rebuttal on that and and to agree on certain of the stuff, it's really simple. When it comes to guns, for one, personally, like I own a gun. I almost never carry it around. I grew up in a place that it's legal to have guns, but per capita, they have virtually as many guns as in America. But it's a whole different ball game up there. I believe that we need psychological checks. I think we should get rid of loopholes, all the stuff. I argue with my gun advocate friends all the time that what you think you're doing with your guns is absolutely asinine. So I'm totally on the gun front with you on that. But I think what you're missing is what I was trying to represent on that analogy is the fundamental aspect of how people go about it. This is why Trump won in 2016, honestly. And it's because people, 50%, you can go with 50% or whatever, of the country didn't get this in 2016. And if they're not careful, they're not going to get it this year in November. Is that it's not that it's getting rid of your truck isn't going to help, or getting rid of your guns in some ways is not going to help or anything. That's all true. I agree with you on that. It's how you go about it. And that goes back to that whole principle that I was talking about in the beginning, is if you go up and say, I'm going to let you keep what you have if you vote for me, people acknowledge that better than somebody opening the door and telling them what they're going to change about their life. So that's exactly why the Democrats can't get their shit together.
Well, hold on a second, because listen, first of all, I really do like the way that you're kind of framing this, even though I don't agree with it. I think that that's the understanding a lot of people have, and it sounds like you share that. The knocking on the door thing. I think if we were to go back to that, I think you're right that that's what a lot of people think. I just don't think it's true. And here's what I mean by that. What you just said is, granted, you don't have the statistics. I don't have them right in front of me either. The 50% you said. But let's not forget, an overwhelming amount of Americans, 3 million more, voted for Hillary Clinton than Donald Trump. And he's won no new voters over with anything that he's done, I don't think. Maybe I'm wrong. But more importantly, if we break it down to the issues and the polling on the issues, then Democrats are overwhelmingly right. They're just not always great at making the arguments, or they're too good at making the arguments and it gets boring and too academic, and Republicans are so good. And I think this is very true. Conservatives are very good at demagoguing and minimizing and simplifying to create monsters out of us. Progressive minded people who care about statistics. That I know more about than anything. It's the only thing I probably know a lot about is media and how it works. And so if you look at something like guns, the overwhelming amount of Americans agree on guns, on almost all the ideas. Overwhelming. The overwhelming amount of Americans agree on religion. The overwhelming amount. The overwhelming amount of Americans believe on regulations for climate. So it's actually overwhelmingly a progressive country if you were to look at policies and polling. What happens is personalities and demagoguing and media and Trump saying things, whatever he wants, whenever he wants, with no basis of truth at all. But it works. And by the way, you know who else does this? All the people that made him, Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh, Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, none of what they're saying is true. But they make people think that it is, and they water things down, frankly, the way that you did with the door knocking analogy. But that's not true. If you break it down the way I'm trying to break it down to you based on policy, which is what I'm more interested in policy than politics. I'm more interested in statistics than people. So, for example, if a pediatrician asks you a question, they ask you 15 questions when you have a newborn. And it's basically parenting 101. Do you have a pool? Okay. Does it have a fence? Where do you put your poisons? Do you have a gun in the house? The first two questions aren't controversial. There's no lobby. There's no pool lobby that's against fences or a fence lobby that's for fences. There's no poison lobby. Chemical makers don't want you to drink their chemicals and sue them. There's only a gun lobby. The pediatrician asking the parent, do you have a gun, isn't an invasion of privacy. It's just a question of, do you have a gun? Good. Is it locked up? Is it away so that the kid doesn't kill themselves with it? But the gun lobby won't allow for pediatricians legally to ask that question. It's these types of points that I'm making that are policy questions. But that's what we like to talk about on the left, policies and statistics, not personalities and demagogued arguments. I'm done again.
Fair enough. And see, here's the thing is you already heard me say, I agree with you on those things. So obviously the point of principle isn't that we disagree on the end result. It's kind of about more along the lines of how you get there. And it kind of, like I said, I've been listening to your show for 11 years now, plus years since you were back on Sirius.
I so appreciate that, Cameron.
And I did. I'm telling everybody, you're the one that I still stick around. I used to listen to them all, from Wilkow and all the way down, and Julie Mason, Cuomo, and although he's kind of gotten a little bit left now, but
has he gotten a little bit left, or has the country, but has the country gotten a little bit crazy?
So here's an interesting thing. So first on the point I was going to make is,
by the way, he's the son of Mario Cuomo and the brother of Andrew Cuomo. He's tried to make himself an independent thinker, but I mean, come on.
I like Andrew. I think Andrew's been great. I think he's getting a little political now, but which he said he wouldn't do. So we'll see how that plays out. But I follow all his interviews and when he comes out in the morning. But what I was going to say is that listening to you over the years, you've actually said a very good point, which I don't think many
When did I make a good point?
8
years ago? How long ago was it? Where were you when it happened? Where was I when it happened?
Okay, so you've always said that Democrats have bad messaging, and it is so goddamn true. It is infuriating because the way that they message, and you just proved that point by saying what you just said. And it's sad because in order to change policy, you got to be in control. And in order to get into control, you got to gain the faith of the people. And if you're not doing that, then you're doing something wrong. And again, my end game is pretty par with yours, but how you get there is a whole different ballgame. And so, anyways, with that, and then with Cuomo, I followed him. I even paid for my Sirius XM subscription to keep him. I finally got rid of it because he's gone way left. I mean, everything is about Trump bashing now instead of just giving the facts.
Okay.
Well, so there's an important point here, and this kind of goes to what you were saying. Okay, the reason Trump does well, even though he says the dumbest things and all that, I watch all of them. I watch very little Fox. I check on it to see what's going on. But I watch MSNBC. I watch CNN. I follow the New York Times, so on and so forth. Mostly left-leaning. They all talk about Trump's lies. 10,000 lies, 10,001 lies. They make top stories.
A lot more than that now.
I know. Well, whatever. It doesn't matter. It could be 100,000. The point is that Trump's winning on that war because that's all they're talking about. But if you flip to Fox and you actually watch it for a few minutes, they're talking about the things going around the country. They may be talking wrong about it, but they're talking about it, and it keeps people interested. When you flip to MSNBC, it is all Trump bash. When you talk to Fox, it's not all left-wing bash. It's just what's going on, and they give their point of view.
I would quibble with everything you just said, but I don't watch it nearly as much as you do. But let me just because literally I could talk to you for another hour, but because it's 9:30 and it takes me so long to edit this together, I want to wrap it up, and maybe we can do a part 2. We can definitely do a part 2. We'll keep this going.
Absolutely.
But what is it about Donald Trump? What has Donald Trump said besides his tax policy, which we already talked about?
Sure.
What has he said? Is there anything else that he has said or done that you think is good, or even more specifically?
Okay.
Does this man have any redeeming character qualities?
Okay. Well, so that's kind of a two-parter. I'll try and answer that.
Yep.
Okay. There is no redeeming quality about Trump. Trump is Trump. I encourage everybody to watch the 8-hour Netflix or whatever it is movie on him. It's like a 4-part series. It's absolutely great. And the reason is because he hasn't changed a little an ink from when he was a kid. He is who he is, and we are a reality TV-based nation, and we hired a reality TV star to be president. So we kind of get what we deserve on that end. Does he have a redeeming quality as character? No, God, no. I mean, he's just a rich guy that banged porn stars, and he does his thing, and whatever. It's all irrelevant to me because I don't have any of the things that bother, say, you. I don't have little girls at home running around.
What about his racism? Don't you care about?
Okay. So it's funny enough that you said that. So I just watched, me and my wife have been watching literally everything on racism for the last 3 weeks.
What do you mean?
All the movies, Selma and stuff that. And, Okay. So I've been watching to learn. I know quite a bit. I try and keep myself educated, but I've been watching. So a great one was, I think it's Jeffrey Robertson, The Truth About Confederacy. It's like the greatest. He's the big lawyer for ACLU.
Okay.
He's got the TED Talk. It's absolutely incredible. It's an hour and 40 minutes long, whatever. Anyways, I'm plugging him because the guy's brilliant and he teaches all about the flag and the statues, and it's just absolutely crazy. And what's going on right now? And does Trump really believe? I mean, is he somewhat racist because of the time that he grew up? Absolutely, I'm sure he is. does he actually care today about the statues or the Confederate flag or the answers he gives? Absolutely not. He really is just in for himself and the money. So that part I can overlook in a sense, and I don't want to sound bad about that, but I believe that we have to definitely continue to try and get rid of racism, and we have to not knock down statues, but we have to move them and rewrite them on what they say about them, and we have to be careful about that. So I definitely recommend.
Even your dog disagrees. Even your dog disagrees. Your dog's like, no. I just heard your dog said, no, he's not. He's a virulent racist. Your dog just said Trump defines racism. He is the living embodiment of a white supremacist. Your dog is mad.
You know, I think he knows how. Your
dog must be a black lab.
Yeah, no, actually, it's a red lab. Very beautiful dog.
Notably anti-racist species. I'm surprised you would even own such a thing.
I know. How about that? And yes, I know you want to get going, so we can do this again later. But what I would say is that I think we have to be very cautious on what Trump does, because he does it because he knows how to play the mob. He knows how to play the left. And I don't think he really cares as much as he's made out to believe. And so when it comes down to it, for 4 more years, and I got a little bit of time before I have to register, so I haven't made my decision yet, obviously. I would like to, like I said, I would have went with Buttigieg. I would have gone left if I could, if I liked Biden at all. But I mean, I think he's horrible. But anyways, I might be swayed down the road. I think that Trump might win again, or probably will win again, because for someone like me, he is not going to affect me,
Cameron,
in a bad way.
You or someone you love could very likely, if they haven't already, died because of the pandemic. You don't blame him for the pandemic?
We have to be. Okay, so real quick on that. I'll be very clear, because I'm in a spike area. Obviously, Arizona is on the news every day. Okay. The truth on the ground and the truth in the media, what's going around, is completely different. Now, I wear a mask. I have sanitizer. I go out to go for groceries, and I go out to exercise. I've seen my family like twice in 3 months. So I'm doing my due diligence. Now, that being said, so Trump started late, no doubt about it. Yeah, give him the nails on that one.
He didn't. No, he has not started yet. No, hold on. He's done nothing.
Okay,
he's done the opposite.
Fine. Okay. Even still, the way that the government and the American people as a whole are doing this is completely asinine backwards. Okay, we are comparing ourselves, and they keep bringing up all these stats, to the European countries and Canada and stuff like that, which are completely different populations, socialism versus capitalism. America is not built to be shut down, where those other countries are. So they're dealing with it.
No. That's silly.
Hold on.
That's a silly thing. They're built to be shut down. There's no such thing as a country that is prepared or built to be shut down. There is no. There's no difference in that.
I'll explain. Okay. So real simply, we, instead of shutting everything down in 3 months ago, give or take, what we should have done, really simply, is say anybody that is of risk or age should get the bailout packages, including with some of the businesses, and everything should have stayed open, and we run through herd immunity. We're learning that now, that we can't shut down again, because we just can't do it. And
Sure we can. Sure we can.
No,
we did it. We've done it here. We did it in New York. We've done it in other communities. We've proven other countries have done it. But this is all nonsense, because none of your... Yes, it is. Here's why. You're making it about shutting down or not shutting it down. Forget that. Forget masks. This man, Donald Trump, has denied the science around anything that he doesn't think works for him. Climate change, forget it. Not a thing, because he doesn't like windmills. But, Cameron, he is against testing. That has nothing to do with the economy. He is against tracing. That has nothing. This isn't European or Asian or American. You test and you trace. There's nothing controversial about that. He's against it. He's against them.
Did you watch his interview yesterday? It was actually quite interesting.
Chris Wallace disaster?
Yeah. It was interesting.
I don't listen to him because nothing he says means anything, because he could say something. He could come out. I mean, I listen to him, but it's a waste of time, because if today he says the door is red, tomorrow he will say the door is blue. So why did I listen to him yesterday when he just changed his mind based on the way that he thought it was going to benefit or hurt him? It makes no sense.
Well, so here's the food for thought. This is the point that I was trying to make earlier, is that if you don't listen to him and you only repeat the bullshit that he says, you're never going to beat him. So you have to find all those fine lines. You have to look at the gray areas and see what he actually is representing, what he's going for. Now,
he's not representing anything, Cameron.
Okay. Oh,
it's not worth listening to because he doesn't say anything that makes sense. Okay. And when he does, he changes his mind the next day. For example, he'll say, in 2 weeks, we're going to do this. And he doesn't do it.
Yeah.
Or he'll say, we did a thing 2 weeks ago that he didn't do. So what am I missing?
That's right. He does that specifically, so all the networks will just fall onto that and talk
what
about
else
it. What else
could they do? What should they do but to take the things he says and does and unpack them?
Well, no. There's a difference between unpacking and just hammering on the lies that we already know he lies about. I mean, we already know that he's going to bullshit you. So, but my point about the pandemic is this. So here in Arizona, They keep saying, oh, we open too soon. It's actually not true because as an Uber driver and, living here and seeing and talking to people over the past 3 months, we did open too soon in the sense that we opened, but we didn't regulate how we open. So a bunch of college kids went to the bars and started spreading.
Doesn't matter. None of this matters. No, it doesn't, because all you're saying is about opening and closing. It would matter. Those would matter if we had testing, if we had tracing, and most important, we do not. We don't have the type of testing that we need. We never have. And we don't even have, in the quote, greatest and richest country in the world, we don't have protective gear for the people who need it. That's all to blame Trump. He has never cared about this pandemic. He has never cared about protecting people. He has only cared about the economy, which makes no sense because nobody is going to go to your restaurant or go in your car if they're scared to go out. It's always been a false choice that he created. And this opening and closing argument you keep making doesn't matter. If there's no testing or no tracing, you don't know. Trump has said without the testing, we wouldn't know. It's quite possibly the goddamn dumbest thing I've ever heard any person say ever. And this is the guy that you're thinking about maybe supporting. He is unlike every single person in the world with the testing and tracing thing. He has done none of it, and the PPE. This man has never tried to fight this pandemic, and even worse, and my final point, and you'll get the final word, he has said, and he has perpetrated a lie, the worst type of lie on the American people, that a thing that is happening isn't happening, that it's a hoax. He has said people believe that no one's dying, that no one's in the hospitals. That is so, it's beyond irresponsible. It is lethally dangerous. This man has the death of hundreds of thousands of Americans on his hands because he's done nothing, and not worse, he's done the opposite of nothing. He's made it worse. Stick with testing and tracing. Forget about your economic argument. Right. Just stick with testing, tracing, and PPE, and tell me what you think.
All right. So, you know what? With him, when it comes to actually helping out the states, he hasn't. That's the one thing he actually hasn't lied about, is that he says he's leaving it to every state individually. Whether that's a good thing or not, we can debate that.
Of course, it's not.
But So fair enough. Now, in Arizona, like I said, we're in a hot spot. We watch our governor every few days come on and say his bullshit, and he's not that great on this either. But what we do know is that if you wanted me to have any kind of argument back for what you just said about pandemic and Trump, it's quite simple. We haven't requested any of the stuff that is needed because we haven't got to capacity, and he does have stuff ready to go for us. And he would release that. So the PPE problem is not an issue. It wasn't in New York.
Yes, it is.
Right now. It's not.
It's always been an issue. Yes, it was in New York. It was so bad. You don't know it. You haven't followed this. It was so bad in New York. We ordered stuff from the federal government, and they took it back. And he has penalized the states that don't vote for him like a mobster. When the federal government intercepted PPE. They took it from Massachusetts. Ask the Republican governor of Massachusetts. In the dark of night, they took their supplies. And
Okay, fair enough. Massachusetts, I didn't follow Massachusetts every day. I did follow. Listen, I followed Andrew Cuomo every single day, and he said his piece every single day on the TV, and I watched everything that he did. And he said himself, they got everything that they needed from them, and then they took everything back when it was good. Now they're on the downscale. It's going to spike in New York again, too. It's going to spike across the entire country. That's what people aren't getting, is that we have to get everybody that's young to get either sick to the herd immunity or the vaccine or a combination of the two. Trust me, I don't trust you. You're wrong. You're fine. You're fine. I wish I was wrong, but I don't want to be the one in 4 months or 5 months going, ha, ha, ha. I don't want to be that one. But I'm telling you, what happens here is not what they're portraying on the TV.
Listen. All that matters is you only have to take on one point. You only need to take on one point. I'll give it last time. Testing.
Okay.
Where is Trump on testing? He literally said, "We are slowing down testing." Do you realize that is killing people? That is lethal. That if I go get a test tomorrow, I won't know the results for 10 days. So I can't go back to my job. I can't go see my family. It makes no sense. It doesn't even matter. The test doesn't matter. Even if I got a test, it doesn't matter.
Fair enough. Now, and I think
every other country in the world is testing millions upon millions and tracing. They have tracers. Trump just defunded. He just defunded tracing and testing, Cameron. He defunded it.
I'm okay. Again, I'm trying to say you got to look at things on a grander scale, not just like I'm guessing you believe that we should keep the school shut down too, right?
I believe what the experts tell us, and they're all on the same page.
So
overwhelmingly, you can cherry pick experts on anything you want to prove your point.
Sure,
but you don't. But and you
that's
can't.
What I don't want to do.
Right. You only need to then use the word consensus, and then you'll always win your argument.
All right. So, like I said, what I'm trying to say to you on the ground floor here in Arizona, at very least, I can't speak for every other state, but the reasons why we have a spike right now, and it's starting to go down, thankfully, but why we had a spike isn't because Trump came here for a goddamn fucking rally. And that's the point. For like 6 days afterwards, all I saw was every media outlet, every network going, oh, there's a spike in Arizona because Trump had a rally with 8,000 fucking people or 3,000 people. That's not true. It's absolutely not true. But that's the message being sent. And
no. Hold on a second. Hold on a second.
Okay.
If it wouldn't matter if it's true or not. Listen,
sure it
Bruce. No, it doesn't. Bruce Springsteen isn't having concerts right now. Do you know why?
Yes.
Why?
Because it'll help spread the disease.
Why is no comedian, no performer, no organization, nobody is having a gathering, no churches, nobody. Why?
That's smart.
Because it's the public health experts know that increases the potential. Whether or not Trump's rally was in fact a catalyst for a spike doesn't matter. The fact that he even did it shows that he has less morality than Bruce Springsteen or Jerry Seinfeld or the NBA or the Catholic Church or anybody. He's the leader of the country, and he is bringing people together in indoor arenas. That is reprehensible and extremely dangerous. You're trying to win a point that's not why the spike is, and I'm trying to tell you it doesn't matter. The fact that he did it, the fact that he would even put people, why would you as a mayor, as a community leader, put people in danger? Why? You know why he did it.
Well, he would do it because he's trying to win points and he's trying to play to his base. That's pretty simple.
Because he needs to be at those. He needs to be at those live rallies for his ego.
I didn't go, but I'm not going to his rally, so I
doesn't matter. The fact is that he did it. That's
okay.
The fact that he's even. I don't even know how that wasn't against the law for him. It's against the law for other places. Why could he do it? Why does he not have to wear a mask when he goes to a factory? Everybody has to, but him.
That one I'll actually fight back a little bit, because as he had said, and it's just common knowledge that himself gets tested probably.
No,
10
Cameron. It's not about the not about the public health. It's about the role modeling. You behave.
Not a role model, though.
Yes, but you have to be.
Pretend he's going to become one now.
No, that's why you should not. No, that's why you should never vote for a person who behaves poorly. Period. Forget about their taxes. Forget about climate change. Forget about abortion. If a person behaves poorly, then they will make poor decisions. If you are not a good role model, you don't get to be principal, mayor, governor, and you certainly don't get to be president. If you don't wear a mask, other people won't wear masks. If you are a bully, other people will be bullies. So you don't have to talk to me about the public health or that he gets tested. When he behaves a certain way, he gives people permission to behave that way. When he is racist, I can be racist. When he is sexist, I can be sexist. And when he doesn't wear a mask, I don't have to wear a mask.
Fair enough. Okay, so let me ask you that.
Role modeling is everything when it comes to leadership.
So here's the thing. We got apparently 50% is left, 50% is right in this country. It's not exactly true. It's more like 30-30.
It depends on what we're talking about. Name the issue.
There's 30% that are definitely right.
I don't think that even matters in any conversation. Okay. Just talk about the issues.
It makes a difference because if Trump doesn't wear a mask, is it going to change how you do things?
Yeah, no. It doesn't. Not going to change how I do things. It doesn't matter. I hate the man, but it's going to change how other people do things. No, but Cameron, everybody, if he says something is a hoax, then people will believe it. If he doesn't wear a mask, then they won't wear a mask. If they don't wear a mask, then we have problems. What do you
listen to exactly what you just said? Okay. The people on the left, doesn't matter what he says. He can say it's a hoax. They're not going to believe him.
It doesn't matter what the people on the left think. It only matters what his supporters think.
Yeah, exactly. But they already agree with him.
No, yes, exactly. They are. No. You are making. You don't realize what you're doing, but you're making a terrible point. If you're saying that they agree with him, right? So
a lot of people
if he wears a mask, they'll wear a mask.
Do you think?
Period.
Maybe
if he said maybe some. It's your point, not mine. It's your point. They're going to do what he does. They're going to do what he says because they support him. So he should do the right thing. He should say the right thing. So people do and say the right thing. When he shares conspiracy theories, people believe they're real. He's the president of the United States of America. He has a bigger following than anybody in the world. He has to say and do the right things. If he doesn't say and do the right things, then a huge percentage, enough people won't do. And when it comes to a pandemic, that matters. When it comes to anything, it matters. But more glaringly in this than anything else, if he doesn't wear a mask, he's a fucking horrible person and a terrible leader. And he is personally responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people because he doesn't wear a mask and he says it's a hoax. Period.
Okay. Well, you made a very good point.
No, is there an argument to that?
Yeah, in a way, there is. I mean, whether or not you want to believe me or agree with me or not, I know it's very difficult for you to kind of see things in a different way.
No, it's not. No, it's not. It's not. No, you have to remember where I grew up. I know all the points you're making aren't new to me. I hear them. I read them.
The bigger point isn't, again, arguing and quibbling over what he does. It's the bigger picture that what you guys have been saying is we already know that is true. He is a horrible idiot. Okay, got it. What can we do to put somebody better in that place?
Anybody is better than him. Anybody. You don't know anybody in your life, much less not in your life, that is as horrible and irresponsible and immoral and unethical as he is. There are plenty of people in prison who have murdered and raped people who have seen the light and gotten to be better and are much better people than he has. And by the way, he's murdered and raped people. So, and he has not apologized for it, and he doesn't admit to it. He's had people, I'm sure, in his New York days, he's looked the other way. Oh, I've heard a million. I'm a New Yorker. We know things here that you can't necessarily print because you don't have two sources and your editor wouldn't allow you. But listen, he's all mobbed up the whole time he's in New York.
I believe you. I believe you.
He is a monstrous person, and the idea that you are even on the fence voting for him, but I'm not. But you are. You're the one who's not sure.
I know. That's right.
But how? But how?
Well, that's what we've been talking about. The fact is that I think there's such a hypocrisy on the other side that
on what side
actually counters on the left versus the right.
Where's the hypocrisy on the left?
Well, just something as simple as what I said earlier on. Biden is like a horrible choice for the Democratic Party.
Where is the hypocrisy?
He doesn't even represent the Democratic Party.
He will be the most progressive president we've ever seen.
I don't want the most progressive.
Okay, but he's not a hypocrite, but that's fine. He represents the left.
No. What I said, the Democratic Party is hypocrisy,
How?
not Biden. Okay, well, that's what I explained earlier, because for the whole time that Trump was running, it was all about we need younger and multicultural to win or a woman to break the glass ceiling. Now you're putting up literally the oldest white fucking establishment dude in the planet.
You get caught up on people and not on policy. There's policies that he supports.
I think he's establishment, and he's going to do. He is going to appoint.
He is going to appoint liberal justices.
Okay, that's fine. I'm all for that because I'm not religious, and I don't. And
but he's also
rights, so
he's also going to pass the most progressive policy. There's nothing hypocritical about him. Sure, he was probably my last choice. But he is
Warren, didn't you?
I loved Elizabeth Warren. Love her. She's a woman of great integrity.
Yeah, total establishment.
No, not. You have no idea anything about.
Here's the other thing.
How is she?
Here's the other thing about Biden.
Driving me nuts now, Cameron.
Sorry, I know. Biden is run like 3 times. You're promoting a loser.
Okay. Well,
it's a hard one.
Nobody is a bigger loser than Donald Trump. He has created so much pain and loss throughout his whole entire life. He has destroyed more people individually, more people than any other American that you can even think of. Now as president, he has killed hundreds of thousands of Americans now.
So I get that he isn't. I'll give you that he's not doing much with the pandemic.
No, he's not. It's not that he's not doing much. He's doing damage. He's doing the opposite of the right thing. He's not just sitting there doing nothing. He's actually taking the things that do work, testing and tracing, and defunding them. And more importantly, his rhetoric. He says it's a hoax. So he's not doing nothing. He's got blood in his hands.
I know. What I'm saying is this. Okay. Yes, he started off late. So
he has not started. He's not started, Cameron. You say he started off late. He's not started yet.
Okay, fine. He hasn't started. Let's go with that. Now, let's just say the pandemic happened under Obama, whatever. I hate using Obama because I didn't even hate the guy. So let's just use that. Do you not think that over time, 1 million people are still going to die from this in the country? Because they are.
No.
It doesn't matter. Unless they get a vaccine in 6 months, 1 million people will die from this no matter what you do. Guaranteed. That's a bet I'll make all day long because you can't fight that. That's just a fact.
Whatever your number you want to pick is, the number is far higher under Donald Trump than under any single other, even Mike Pence, Republican or Democrat, period. Because none of them would have said a hoax. No, he's not better than Pence because Pence would not have said this isn't happening. Pence would not have said don't wear a mask. Pence, as much as he's been anti-science and anti-gay, he would know what it would take to get reelected. He is not nearly as self-centered as Donald Trump. He definitely wouldn't have rallies and put people in danger himself. He definitely wouldn't. He also, he is, I mean, there's just, I could go on and on. I mean, but there's nobody in the world that is worse than Donald Trump at this.
Okay, fair enough. I got to remember, like I said, I'm being completely honest here, and I may come across as an asshole for it, but I will say, when it comes to my vote and what affects me, affects everybody differently, and vice versa. What matters to you might not matter to me nearly as much. So I'm looking at all aspects of it. Do I care if Trump is ethically anything? Do I care if he's morally anything? As long as the guy doesn't start a world war and I make money under him, and he's not going like off the rails on guns or abortion or something because I'm actually on.
He has gone off the rails on guns. He has gone off the rails on abortion. He has started two wars.
Guns. No, he hasn't started.
Yes, he has. Wars. He has. Yes, he absolutely has. Implicitly, okay. He has pulled out of NATO. He's supporting Russia. He's supporting Russia in their wars. He supports the Saudis in their wars. He has started a war on the American people. This pandemic is far worse than any war. It's far worse. More Americans have died in this pandemic than all of the other wars, Cameron, than all of them. What does it matter how you die? If you die fighting in a war, which, by the way, you either volunteered for or were drafted, and it was a war, it was a hot war in another country, or you died in America simply living your life. It's worse. It's worse to die simply living your life. It's worse. There's nothing worse than watching your parent die on FaceTime. Nothing.
Absolutely. So, yeah, absolutely. So, but the only thing I would say is you got to be.
And abortion? He's gone way off the rails on abortion. Yeah, he's gone way off the rails on guns.
Okay, well, gun laws haven't changed since I moved
Exactly.
here, so
he's done nothing, and you need to change gun laws. You need to change them.
But I was able to have the same gun under Obama. Nothing's changed.
But that wasn't Obama's fault. Obama tried to change them. What you say about Obama, you don't take consideration. He's not a dictator. He had Congress. Everything Obama wanted to do about guns, everything Obama wanted to do about economics, all the amazing things that he wanted to do about health care, they wouldn't let him do it. Then Trump came in. And everything changed. Everything he could do whatever he wanted.
That's an
all right, Cameron.
Okay, so
I gotta go.
Because I know. Just one last thing.
I'm sweating.
I know because
no AC.
Urge a little bit of caution when you say about the deaths and equivocating it to wars, because around the world millions of people have died, maybe in less so.
I think the deaths in America for the pandemic are worse than the deaths of war. I absolutely think they're worse.
But hold on, that's not what I'm talking about. You got to be very careful here, because I see this on CNN every night. There's Trump is killing 125,000 or 300,000 Americans, whatever the number is at right now.
Over 140.
If you're going to do that, if you blame him for every single American death in the pandemic, then you also have to blame him for every death in the world, because it's not border specific. You have to be cautious about that.
Of course, it's border specific. Of course, it is. Canada and Mexico
are spiking right now too.
They're doing better than we have.
Well, they're doing better because they have less people in a bigger country.
No, they're doing better because they believe in science. For the same reason they did better during the financial collapse. For the same reason and they believe in science. Are they testing and tracing? Yes. Are they funding it? Yes.
They're not as good.
Are they listening to the experts? Yes. Yes. No, it's not. No, listen, this is the final argument, which is why you're wrong.
Okay.
In the Iraq War, the Americans who died in the Iraq War volunteered for that.
Yes.
Okay. That is different than not volunteering to die. The people who are nurses and doctors did not volunteer to get this disease. Forget it. The people who worked at the grocery store, the people who worked at nursing homes, they didn't volunteer to walk into a war. That's on Trump, for sure. For sure.
Well, then you have to blame him for every death around the world then.
No, you don't. Because borders do. No, they don't.
It's happening no matter what you want.
No, it's not. But it's happening at far less There are countries that are doing far better with their policies that are listening to the science.
Right. And I absolutely agree with that. And that's why I said a lot of the deaths here in America were due to Trump's inability to get shit together.
Well, whatever you find, you admitted it. You said a lot of. Whether or not you say all or a lot, it doesn't make. It makes no difference.
Well,
it doesn't. A lot of deaths, all the deaths. What difference does it make? As long as you say they're his fault, I think you know who to vote for. Joe Biden, 2020. Thank you for joining me. Listen to your dog. All right, Cameron, I got to go. Is there anything on this tape that you want to get rid of or don't want to stand by? Or
God, no. You put in everything that you possibly can.
I'll keep it all. Make my life easier. I just want to make sure you feel like I didn't disrespect you, that I was fair with you.
God, no.
Okay, awesome.
No,
we'll do another one. We'll do another one soon. This is fun for me. It's interesting to get your perspective, as frustrating as it is.
My biggest take on this, and again, I don't know exactly. I don't like Trump. Trust me, I don't. but I have some decisions to make like everybody else. But my biggest thing is that I appreciate you doing this, because I hate the fact that it seems like whenever you bring on somebody from the right or whatever, it's always I can't even play this because they're so fucking crazy. And I'm trying to give a more central.
Oh, dude, you are actually, listen, so as long as you don't believe that there's a global pedophile ring run by Democrats in the deep state, I think we're good. No. I think that's you're exactly the type of person I want to have a conversation with about with this. I think that the vast majority of Trump supporters are way off the rails, and the reason why I didn't play that tape of that guy is because he said he did not remember or know about the Newtown shooting, the Sandy Hook shooting.
Oh, fuck. Yeah, I remember that when you said that. Yeah.
So I was just like, listen, I don't want to, as much as I didn't like him or what he had to say, I didn't want to destroy his life. See, I'm a person, that's another difference, I think, and I'm generalizing, between liberals and conservatives in general. I don't think this of all conservatives at all, but there's a lot. And actually, forget about it. Forget about liberal conservative, okay? Sure. If I hate somebody, and I do, I hate some people, I do. I don't want bad things to happen to them. That's not my beat. That's not what I believe. I don't want bad things to happen to their family. That's to me crosses a line of morality that's where I stand. However, there are a lot of people on the right or just in general that they might hate me and they want bad things out of me. That's not where I live in my moral space. It's not how I was brought up. I think that people are a product of their opportunities, their upbringing, and what they learn mostly through their experiences, unfortunately, not through their education. So I have a lot of mercy and forgiveness and understanding and open-mindedness. And I listen to every side. What I can't do is put someone on the show that believes that Wayfair is selling kids. Right. That I just can't do that. I don't think it's, good. And even so, I wouldn't want something bad to happen to them. I want their beliefs to die, but not pain to come to them and their family. So that's, generally where I stand. So, okay.
So,
we'll do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. Two things. One, did you play box lacrosse or field lacrosse?
Both.
Okay, I played box lacrosse, so that was a tough sport.
I grew up on the border of a Native American reservation, so yeah.
Right. And the only other thing I love
box lacrosse. So we played in hockey rinks. It was brutal.
Yeah, that's what we did too. We played outdoor and indoor. Oh man,
not on the ice. For people listening, Cameron and I, we didn't play lacrosse on ice. It was in the summer when there was no ice. Go ahead.
Yeah. The only other thing, obviously, if you get a chance, go to my website and read some of the stuff, and then you can actually have more fuel to come at me with. Number two, the last thing is just remember to win this election, whether you believe what you believe, and it all comes down in the shake. Remember your speech the day after Trump won. It was such a great thing. I listen to your show, obviously, all the time, but that was like the greatest, just remember what you talked about?
No.
Okay, so basically it was this. It was, holy shit, he won. I guess we fucking didn't listen. And you revisit that next day, your next show after it. And it was absolutely great because you were like, I'm going to change. I'm going to start listening to more people because we got it wrong. And I fear you're going down the exact same path.
I think I might regret those. I think I might disagree with those early remarks. Okay. Because I don't think we got it wrong. But I do want to talk. Next time I want to talk to you about the kind of arrogance and elitism of liberals. Because I think that's what I was talking about. And I want to talk about that because you have to understand, I think people, because they don't know me that well, and that's fine. They don't know where I grew up and how I grew up. They just don't.
Right.
Like I don't come from some rich blue blood family. I grew up in upstate New York in the sticks. My mom did not go to college. My mom grew up in abject poverty without plumbing for the first part of her life, without a TV. My dad's parents, neither of my parents' went to college. And I'm not complaining. I'm saying I'm the typical white rural. That's how I grew up. I don't think there's anything that, frankly, I really don't think there's much that I don't understand because I lived it. About conservative minded stuff. The religious stuff, I live that too. I get it. I get it.
Yeah, you were Catholic growing up,
I was
right?
Catholic. I kissed my crucifix every night till I was 14. And yes, absolutely.
Sorry, religious people, but that's crazy.
It is. I didn't masturbate with my hand. I like would rub my dick into the mattress in a soccer ball pillow because I thought that was okay, and touching myself was not okay because I thought I would go to hell. Like crazy stuff that it made me believe.
Exactly. So you know what? Taking that knowledge goes a long way. Maybe not that story to everybody because that's a little bit.
Well, anyway. It's just my. I'm just living my truth, Cameron.
Yeah, but that's how I win the arguments against my gun nut friends. Is you have to educate. It's all that
I know.
Next time we talk, trust me, I have such a great take on education. Next time we talk, it's absolutely crazy.
But you know that this show, but yeah, anytime. But you know that this show has never been about my thoughts. The show has been about educating people with the best experts I can find. Now, they may not be right, but if I'm going to talk about plumbing, I'm going to have a plumber on. If I'm going to talk about flying a plane, I'm going to have a pilot on. I'm not going to tell you how to fix your toilet or fly a plane. That's this show. It's what it'll always be. It's not necessarily this segment. This segment is a different kind, and I do these plenty. It's me and you having it out and talking about our differences, and that's fine too. But most of what I do is finding the best experts with the most credibility and experience. Doesn't mean they're right, but they're more right than I would ever be.
Right, and you know that's what. Hey, trust me. I if you go on my Twitter account right now, almost every person I follow that's not hockey related is because of your show. And you would probably agree with 99% of the people I follow. I follow like nobody on the right because I just think it's a bunch of bullshit. But however, be careful that just whether they're right or wrong doesn't matter. It is the average Joe that also has a say, and sometimes the experts get caught in their own. Sometimes those experts get caught in their own little world that they think they know what's going on the ground, but they know what's going on with the other people.
The wrongest all of my expert friends have been about anything is that they said, don't listen to conspiracy theorists, they're fringe. And I said, no. Right. No. And I was right, and they were wrong. And I hate that. Yeah. I wish I was wrong. All right, Cameron.
All right, buddy.
All right, send me, listen, before I hang up, send me, and if you can, as soon as you can, because I put this together now, a link to your website that you keep mentioning. So I can put that in the show notes. Okay?
Absolutely, boss.
Awesome. We'll talk soon.
All right, buddy.
Thanks, man.
Have a good night.
You too. Wow, you deserve an award for sitting and listening to all of that. Was it good? Was it interesting? Was it annoying? Did I handle it well? I don't know. But that's what's cool about podcasting. And that's what's cool about this show. I'm trying to get folks on. I mean, if someone's going to subscribe to the podcast and going to submit to a conversation and taping it that way, I'm happy to have them on. What would you have said differently? How did I handle it? I know that I could have obviously can always do better. What arguments would you have made with Cameron? I'll definitely continue that conversation with him, and maybe I'll make your arguments. Maybe I'll put you on with him. Who wants to take on Cameron next? Cameron would be happy to join you in conversation. He's always, I think he's eager to have his thoughts heard, and I'm eager to showcase them. So I don't know what you think about that, but I'm psyched to have somebody on that has that point of view and doesn't think that there's a global pedophile ring and believe in QAnon. So definitely check out Cameron on Twitter and let him know what you think. At CameronGabs15 is his Twitter handle. And that's all I've got for you today. A lot more coming the rest of the week. Another great week of episodes coming your way. Great guests on the show. Let me know what I could do better, what I could do differently. And please consider a paid subscription. A lot of new subscribers the last week or so, 2 weeks really. So sign up right now if you haven't already. What are you waiting for? Patreon.com/Pete Dominick, or go to the paid subscription on the show links. Let's keep each other sane. Let's stay connected. You're not alone. I love you, and I'll talk to you tomorrow right here on Stand Up.